Chapter 347, After becoming the Emperor. Mastering the position of Emperor, possessing the identity of the Emperor and the will of the Dark King, was equivalent to holding the ultimate trump card. Lin Yo could clearly feel a cold and insane will within his body, a supreme power that craved the destruction of everything. It constantly emitted emotional fluctuations of slaughter and destruction, trying to drive Lin Yo to kill indiscriminately. Fortunately, the psyker field intensity of this will was limited. As long as he sat on the golden throne and activated the stasis field, the increase in emotions and desires it brought would be restricted to the lowest level. In this situation, Lin Yo could completely block the opponent's negative interference with his willpower. He closed his eyes on the throne, sensing the flow of the psyker field. About 100 kilometers away from the Terra Palace, on another peak of Terra's highest mountain range, Lin Yo sensed an extremely vast psyker field. That was where the star beacon was located, where thousands of etheric nullifiers had their psyker field drawn from them every minute. Their psyker field converged through warp energy pipelines, and after being pressurized and frequency increased by the energy hub, they transformed from scattered individual psyker field into a unified Alpha Plus grade psyker field, which was then delivered to the star beacon as fuel. After activating the throne's stasis field, the flow of psyker field from the star beacon court split into two. The majority continued to be sent to the star beacon, while a small portion came to the Terra Palace, entering the throne's base, and after processing by a buffer, became a gentle trickle of psyker field. As long as Lin Yo willed it, he could absorb these pure psyker field, which carried no emotional fluctuations and would not harm him. This was the privilege of the Emperor, God Emperor. Relying on sacrificing etheric nullifiers to obtain pure psyker field. In essence, this method was no different from the Chaos God's sacrificial rituals. Lin Yo did not accept the psyker field support from the star beacon court. It wasn't that he was being fastidious, rather, as the Lord of Peru, this method of obtaining psyker field by draining etheric nullifiers was too inefficient for him, far inferior to the Peru Empire's warp creature fishing technology. Lin Yo switched his consciousness to the Peru Empire's Weird Boy and found Pakadu, asking, "Are Malkador's clones ready?" "Yes, Dada. 10 Malkador clones are ready and can be put into use at any time. Bring them to me." "As you command, Dada." Pakadu left. A moment later, 10 Malkador clones walked into Lin Yo's meditation chamber. After the ritual array here was removed, it became Lin Yo's meditation and reception area. These 10 Malkadors possessed the intelligence, cultivation, and thinking habits of the original Malkador, but they were not immortals and did not possess psyker field. They were implanted with massive knowledge and the parapsyker field, essentially being orc variants with the appearance, working ability, and personal habits of the original Malkador. If Paraboy were used as the genetic template, the genetic purity of these orc variants would be around 40%, which was higher than the critical value for possession, 30%, thus placing them under Lin Yo's control. "Do you know why I created you?" Lin Yo sat cross-legged on the ground, scanning the 10 Malkador clones as he asked. The Malkadors simultaneously bowed in salute and responded in unison. "Yes, Beast God, you created us to manage the Imperium of Man. We will do our utmost to drastically reform the Imperium of Man." Lin Yo nodded with satisfaction. "Very good. I will send you to the Terra Palace. From today onwards, you 10 will replace all members of the High Lords of Terra and the War Council. Resistors, kill. Disobedient, kill. Critics, kill. Those who feign compliance, kill. Those who deceive, kill. Those who commit corruption, kill. If you feel 10 clones are not enough, you can tell Pakadu, and I will have more cloned." "Yes, Beast God." Lin Yo had Pakadu sail the ship to reality, under the light of the star beacon. He switched to the Emperor Boy and activated Alpha Plus grade psyker field, using the Terra Palace as a teleportation anchor to open a portal for the Malkador clones. The energy required for this process came from the star beacon, eliminating the need to consume monocrystals. After the 10 Malkador clones arrived, Lin Yo summoned the Custodes in the name of the Emperor. Custodes Captain Valdo had previously been resisting demons within the artificial webway until Lin Yo sealed the Golden Gate with his psyker field, which gave him a chance to breathe. Before entering the Terra Palace, he did not know that the person on the throne had changed. Logically, Lin Yo could have used Valdo's cognitive bias to command him as the Emperor. But Lin Yo did not intend to do so. Such an approach was not secure enough and carried obvious hidden dangers. Valdo would surely come into contact with the Eldar later. If the Eldar revealed to him that the Emperor is not the Emperor, Valdo might lead the Custodes in a violent rebellion against the person on the throne. To avoid such a situation, Lin Yo planned to replace all Custodes with his own people. Valdo and the Custodes Centurions, Praetorian Guards, and Aquilon Terminators were summoned to the Terra Palace by Lin Yo. As soon as they entered, they were immobilized by Lin Yo's psyker field, followed by a complete process of extracting genetic samples, fusing paragene fragments, and creating new life forms. In a short while, all the Custodes who came with Valdo had transformed into Custodes boys, each with a para-orc gene purity of no less than 40%, placing them under Lin Yo's control. After this, Lin Yo summoned other custodes for mass transformation. Approximately half an hour passed, and a total of 30,000 custodes had all become custodes boys. Terra Palace, the core area of Terra, became Lin Yo's private territory. This was not the end. The Star Beacon Court, the Star Language Court, and the Navigator Guild, these three most important departments of the Imperium, also needed to undergo periodization. Lin Yo had the custodes and Malkador clones divide their work, escorting the main members of these three departments into the Terra Palace in batches. 2 Terra days later, amidst the widespread Chaos Orcs' harassment of Terra, Lin Yo completed the restructuring of Terra's management. Later that same day, Space led the Para fleet to support Terra. 3 days later, the Chaos Orcs in the Terra system were completely cleared out. The warp storm caused by the death of numerous life forms subsided, and the light of the star beacon pierced through the warp ripples, projecting light outwards. Roberta Guillimon led the Ultramarines, arriving belatedly. Lin Yo called Guillimon into the Terra Palace and spent half a day meticulously modifying his gene fragments. That evening, Guillimon Boy appeared, and the chief librarians and company captains of the Ultramarines also became variants of Para-Orcs. Guillimon was the only surviving gene seed primarch of the Imperium of Man in the Rebellion-era sub-universe. In the gene laboratory beneath the Terra Palace, genetic samples of other gene seed primarches were preserved. Theoretically, Lin Yo could use his gene editing abilities to resurrect other gene seed primarches and complete their paraization. He spent some time studying the gene seed primarch samples and finally decided to clone 20 Guillimons. Guillimon's clones, like Malkador's clones, did not possess immortality, nor did they have Psyker Field, they merely had the working ability of the original Guillimon and combat ability slightly lower than that of a Custodes captain. According to Lin Yo's plan, the Imperium of Man would transition from its original segmentum sector-subsector system to a segmentum ground sector-sector-subsector system. 5 segmentums, each divided into 4 grand sectors, totaling 20 grand sectors. The size of each grand sector was roughly equivalent to Ultramar, falling within Guillimon's management capabilities. Each Guillimon clone would be responsible for managing 1 grand sector. The Ultramarines would fully transform from external combat troops for territorial expansion into internal security armed forces for internal management. The work of expanding territory, crusading against Xeno's civilization, and recovering lost civilizations would be temporarily shelved, to be considered after the Imperium of Man completed its adjustments. Of course, the work of dealing with Chaos Orcs and demons proceeded normally, but it was the Para-Empire's Space, not Guillimon, who was responsible for these matters. The Heart Corridor was filled with fallen Imperial worlds. Space directly carried out exterminatus, cleansing all planets where demons appeared, and then dispatched fleets and ground forces for in-depth cleanup. In the Kirkili Star Zone, there was a warp rift with dimensions already reaching 1,200 meters by 800 meters, it could not be closed, only sealed. Lin Yo had the beast seal the rift, preventing demons from invading reality through it. At this point, the Imperium of Man's greatest external threat was removed, what remained was a long and arduous transformation. High-intensity work led to an even greater demand for talent. 10 Malkador clones and 20 Guillimon clones were not enough, Lin Yo doubled the number, and only then could the Imperium of Man's transformation proceed smoothly. Meanwhile, the Para-Empire's own development did not stop. Expanding monocrystal production capacity and expanding military recruitment were the 2 primary tasks set by Lin Yo. Pakadu formulated a plan for each of these tasks. First, the raw material for monocrystals was warp energy. Experiments at PAL Academy confirmed that Para-Shadow could protect Eldar Psyker field engines in the warp, allowing this Eldar device to directly absorb warp energy and convert it into the raw materials needed by monocrystal factories. The production efficiency of warp monocrystals increased by more than 10-fold compared to before, and it no longer required time-consuming and laborious capture of warp creatures. Obtaining more Psyker field engines became the key to unleashing monocrystal productivity at present. This production plan had a professional term, warp energy extraction. Secondly, simply relying on gene editing technology and spore cultivation technology to expand the paramilitary was still too slow, providing only about 10 million paraboys per day. To control the entire galaxy, the webway, and the corresponding warp of the galaxy, and to lay a solid foundation for the widespread adoption of the warp energy extraction plan, how many paraboys would be needed? Pakadu estimated and concluded that approximately 500 billion para-standing troops would be required. These 500 billion paraboys would be combat-capable and equipped with basic combat gear, not simplified versions wearing steel loincloths and wielding clubs. With these 500 billion para-standing troops, the Para-Empire could establish warp energy extraction bases in any corner of the galaxy, continuously exploiting the warp. This would provoke resistance from the Chaos Gods, but it didn't matter, the 500 billion para-standing troops were not to be trifled with, even if the enemy used exterminatus, the paraboys could bury them with human wave tactics. So, the question arose, how would such a scale of para-standing troops be obtained? And how could troop replenishment be normalized? This question, again, involved the Eldar. The Eldar Craft World's infinity circuits were good things. They integrated multiple uses such as soul containment, reincarnation, knowledge infusion, and career planning. With the infinity circuits, for every para-standing troop member lost, the para-empire could generate a new para-boy through the infinity circuits and immediately put him into use. How many infinity circuits would be enough? Pakadu truly didn't know, there was no data on this. Lin Yo mused that since he didn't plan to leave a place for the Eldar in the rebellion era anyway, he might as well launch an Eldar annihilation war now, eliminate all Eldar, and get his hands on the infinity circuits. Thus, a grand mobilization was launched in Para-Home. This war would not require the Imperium of Man to intervene. Out of sentiment and moral considerations for the human race, Lin Yo intended to build a greenhouse for the Imperium of Man. Within the greenhouse, the Imperium of Man would enjoy perpetual happiness, free from the disturbances of chaos, xenos, and heretics. Outside the greenhouse, the Para-Empire would undertake all external armed actions. To avoid involving the Imperium of Man, Lin Yo specifically had Guilliman and Malkador work together to block all messages and communication requests coming from the Eldar side. At the same time, Black Library, Obsidian Archive. A faint speck of light hovered about a meter above the ground. As time passed, more and more specks of light appeared out of thin air, converging towards the first one. From point to line, from line to surface, from surface to three-dimensional model, Aelna's image gradually became clear. The last speck of light merged into her body, and Aelna suddenly opened her eyes, taking a long, deep breath. Hiss whoosh, finally, I'm back. Aelna murmured with lingering fear. Half a month ago, she was crushed to dust by the Emperor's psyker field, and her soul immediately returned to the Black Library's infinity circuit. After the rebirth program activated, she finally endured the extremely difficult rebirth process and regained her ability to move within the archive. Without thinking further, Aelna quickly walked towards the reading shelf, opened the Book of Fate, and checked the latest revelations from the prophecy. Although Lin Yo killed the Emperor, expelled the God Emperor, and occupied the throne of the Imperium of Man, our plan to seal the Dark King has still succeeded. Lin Yo will ultimately cause the Dark King to perish along with the Rebellion-era sub-universe, please believe this. Now, all we need to do is satisfy his wishes and avoid incurring his displeasure. Please immediately notify all craft worlds to fully transfer to the end times and merge souls with the craft worlds there. Before leaving, major craft worlds like Aletter, Biltan, and Yandan must voluntarily hand over their spare infinity circuits to Lin Yo. Note, it must be a gratuitous and voluntary handover of spare infinity circuits. Do not resist Lin Yo, do not threaten him, otherwise it will cause unnecessary casualties. In addition, you also need to do a few other things. Chapter 348 Dividing Territories. Oh? The Eldar are willing to give us 10 infinity circuits? Are you sure? Near the Weird Boy's shack on Para-Home, Lin Yo was using his gene editing ability to optimize the Emperor Boy's gene fragments, reducing the amount of monocrystals and various raw materials needed to cultivate him. Pakadu said from not far away. Yes, Dada. I just received news from Purple Sprout that the Eldar plan to relocate all their people to the end times, using soul fusion technology to merge the Eldar of both eras. This will give them at least 10 additional infinity circuits out of thin air. They are willing to give us 10, with only one condition, that the Dark King be annihilated along with the Rebellion-era sub-universe. This request can be granted. In fact, Lin Yo had already planned to do so. It should be noted that the Eldar might tamper with the infinity circuits. Once the 10 infinity circuits are obtained, they must first undergo a thorough inspection before being put into experimentation. Oh, right, the so-called Purple Sprout is Isa Trazin. She was sent by Aelna to be a liaison and is currently residing in a corner of Kamarak, under the strict supervision of Along. Did Purple Sprout say when they would transfer? Lin Yo asked. Pakadu said. Dada, the boys responsible for monitoring the Ark have reported that the small Ark worlds have already begun to transfer. The message Purple Sprout gave us is that the transfer is expected to be completed within 2 months. The 10 gifted infinity circuits will be centrally placed in the grand square in front of the Black Library, and we need to go retrieve them ourselves. Additionally, before delivering the infinity circuits, Aelna hopes to speak with you directly. Lin Yo put down the spore cultivation bottle in his hand, stood up, and stomped a few steps with his staff. All right. Tell Purple Sprout to inform Aelna that I will send an envoy to meet her shortly. Yes, Dada. Pakadu left. Lin Yo looked at the freshly loosened soil, feeling a bit speechless. The Eldar as a race, when viewed with traditional values, truly seem peculiar. Just a while ago, they were shouting for war against the Para-Orcs, and now they've made a complete change of attitude, willingly offering infinity circuits. Prophecy, something the Eldar hold as a guiding principle, is more like a double-edged sword for other races. If the prophecy is favorable to their race, the Eldar can become good friends. If the prophecy is unfavorable to them, the Eldar will immediately change their stance and draw their blades. Lin Yo reckoned that the reason for the Eldar's change in attitude this time was likely related to him becoming an orc true god. When he became so powerful that even prophecy couldn't manipulate him, prophecy would soften its stance towards him, leading to a fundamental shift in the Eldar's attitude. Thinking this, Lin Yo opened the system interface, selected a Blood Raven kid as his representative, and manipulated him to go to the Black Library. Isa Trazyn had Aelna's teleportation beacon on her. Lin Yo possessed the Blood Raven kid, went to Kumarak, and found Isa Trazyn living in the city ruins. Aelna used Isa Trazyn as an anchor to open a portal, and Lin Yo entered it. Arriving at the Obsidian Archive again, Lin Yo's state of mind was much calmer than before. Aelna's aura was noticeably weaker, and her psychic fluctuations were unstable, as if she had just recovered from a serious illness. It seemed that even with the infinity circuits assisting, the burden of resurrection after death was still difficult to bear, especially for an Eldar god avatar like Aelna. The power granted by a god to its avatar is limited. If she died a few more times, Aelna would probably lose this part of her power and regress to an ordinary Eldar. These are the user manuals and technical blueprints for the infinity circuits. Aelna pointed to the data pads and parchment scrolls on the table. You can take them back and look through them at your leisure. I guarantee there are no traps on them. Your words don't count. Lin Yo chuckled, looking at the crystal scripture on the reading stand. What it says counts, and only what it says counts. Aelna pretended not to understand Lin Yo's hidden meaning, extended her right arm towards the reading stand, and gestured please. Do you want to see what destiny has revealed to you? No need. Lin Yo waved his hand, just say what you want to say directly. I have many matters to attend to recently, and I can't stay here too long. Alright, then I'll start with the prophecy's revelation to us Eldar. Aelna pulled out a chair, inviting Lin Yo to sit facing her, and said. After the Omniscient Church was destroyed, Xianch withdrew from the Age of Apostasy sub-universe and returned to the End Times. However, this doesn't mean he suffered heavy losses. In fact, after operating in the Age of Apostasy for some time, Xianch's method of corrupting life forms became more efficient, and he also gained a Chaos Space Marines army of about 130 million under his command. I think you should know how this army came about. Lin Yo thought for a moment, then nodded slightly. Is it the army inside the Void Whale? Exactly. Xianch operated in the Age of Apostasy for about 120 years. He controlled Ultramar's population level within a certain range. A portion of the population exceeding this range was sacrificed, and another portion, after strict screening, was secretly made into Chaos Space Marines and hidden inside the Void Whale. This is a rapid mobile force, loyal to Xianch, and its combat power and mobility are outstanding among the Chaos factions. Aelna paused. Kern, Nurgle, and Slaanesh are rooted in the dark side of the Imperium of Man in the End Times. Since the Great Rift opened, the dark side of the Imperium has lost contact with the Imperium of Man. Space Marine warbands, Mechanic-use forces from Forging Worlds, Night Houses, and various other Imperial armed forces have, more or less, been corrupted by the Chaos Gods and become heretics. Kern, Nurgle, and Slaanesh have comparable influence, the three have divided the dark side of the Imperium. Xianch, a latecomer, has surpassed them, and currently, the dark side of the Imperium is in a state of conflict among the four gods. Lin Yo pondered and asked. Has Guilliman of the End Times awakened? No. The prophecy tells me that Guilliman's awakening is still several months away. Guilliman hasn't awakened yet, and the Great Rift hasn't opened either, which means that the current time in the End Times should be around the 999th year of the 41st millennium, not yet entering the 42nd millennium. This was the most turbulent and chaotic period for the Imperium of Man. No wonder the Emperor was too busy to concern himself with the other two sub-universes. Aelna continued. 4 Chaos Gods are entrenched in the dark side of the Imperium, they have poured at least 1/3 of their power there. We plan to unite with the Imperium of Man to transfer part of the Chaos Gods' power to the Rebellion era for you to seal. In the most ideal scenario, when the Rebellion era sub-universe is annihilated, the Dark King will be completely destroyed, and the other 4 Chaos Gods will suffer heavy losses, unable to cause trouble for a short period. Lin Yo raised an eyebrow. You want me to seal part of the power of the 4 Chaos Gods? You think too highly of me, don't you? Aelna spread her hands. If you are unwilling, we will not force you. I am merely offering you a way to weaken the Chaos Gods, not demanding that you must do anything. However, I must tell you that the Emperor has already agreed to cooperate with us. That is to say, when the time is right, whether you are willing or not, part of the Chaos Gods' power will be transferred by us to the Rebellion era. Damn it! Lin Yo said coldly. If you dare to transfer them over, I dare to transfer them to the Age of Apostasy and the End Times. Don't believe me, try it. It's no use, Lin Yo, our method of transferring the Chaos Gods' power is not within your expectations, you cannot resist. So, I suggest you'd best cooperate with us. Aelna remained unmoved by Lin Yo's threat, evidently having already foreseen Lin Yo's reaction from the Book of Fate. I have one more thing to tell you. We know we cannot stop you from going to other sub-universes, so we intend to make some agreements with you. The Age of Apostasy sub-universe and the bright side of the Imperium in the end times are regarded by the Emperor as his territory, you'd best not set foot there. The Ark worlds in these two sub-universes are our Eldar territory, please do not monitor us. You can freely enter and exit any other areas besides these places. Lin Yo said. The real dimension, warp, and webway of the Rebellion era sub-universe belong to me. I can freely enter and exit the warp and webway of the Age of Apostasy sub-universe. I can also freely enter and exit the dark side of the Imperium, warp, and webway of the end times. Is that what you mean? Exactly. Lin Yo thought for a moment, finding no immediate issues. This can be implemented for now, I have no objections. Aelna spread her hands. Good, I'm done talking. I'll open a portal to send you back. Lin Yo stood up, glanced at the crystal scripture, and stepped through the door. The Blood Raven Kid was monitoring Isa Trazyn in Kamarak, and Lin Yo switched his consciousness to the weird boy, called Pakadu over, and recounted his conversation with Aelna to him. After listening, Pakadu mused. Are you sure Huang Pitzi and the Eldar will allow us free access to the webway and warp of the end times? I'm sure. Lin Yo said, I reckon Huang Pitzi and the Eldar don't have good intentions. The dark side of the Imperium in the end times is becoming a rotten backyard, and the situation of the webway and warp there is concerning. If we want to use the webway of the end times, we'll definitely have to spend a lot of effort cleaning it up first, which means working for Huang Pitzi and the Eldar for free. Lin Yo picked up the hoe used for loosening soil, turned over the fertile earth, and continued. As for Huang Pitzi and the Eldar transferring the Chaos God's power to the Rebellion era sub-universe, I'm not too concerned. After all, according to our plan, the Rebellion era sub-universe is just a test field. We will experiment with methods of extracting warp energy here and explore ways to coexist peacefully with the shrimp. When the time is ripe, we will transfer to the end times to avoid being affected by the annihilation of the Rebellion era sub-universe. I reckon if we want to negotiate with Huang Pitzi, we can use the shrimp empire of the Rebellion era as a bargaining chip. Pakadu nodded repeatedly. Yes, you are right. I have an idea. Oh? Tell me about it. Pakadu pulled out a data pad and opened an experimental report. Please take a look at this first. These are the experimental conclusions that Pad and his research team obtained while experimenting with psychic engines in the warp. The idea I just had is related to this experimental report. Lin Yo handed the hoe in his hand to Zalger, took the data pad, and quickly looked through it, a glint flashing in his eyes. Pad, also known as Land Kid. He was created based on the gene fragments of Land Great Sage. Land Great Sage was originally a craftsman, very skilled in developing various scientific instruments. After PAL Academy created Pad, Lin Yo personally implanted 1/3 of the Super Orc thinking power into him. Just this 1/3 of Super Orc thinking power transformed Pad, achieving an effect where 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. Take this experimental report for example. Lin Yo's original intention was for Pad to find a way to bypass the Eldar's technical limitations, deeply modify the psychic engine, and then use the modified product to directly extract warp energy in the warp. The experiment went very smoothly. Pad, with his Super Orc thinking power, was like a tiger with wings. He quickly figured out the principle of the psychic engine and cracked the Eldar's warp energy compression technology. Earlier today, the Para Empire's first completely independently developed warp energy compressor, with full independent intellectual property rights, was freshly produced. The compression efficiency of this thing is comparable to that of a psychic engine, and there is great room for improvement. Compression efficiency is calculated as follows. The energy reaction intensity of warp energy in the warp is generally alpha level. Warp energy of the same level will always occupy a certain space in a static state according to the amount of energy units. Assuming the alpha level warp energy amount is 10 joules, then its volume at standard temperature, pressure, and static state is 1 cubic meter. The Eldar's psychic engine can compress 1 cubic meter of alpha level warp energy into a 10 cm** 10 cm** 1 cm ling bone thin slice. The Para Empire's warp energy compressor can produce a 3 cm** 3 cm** 1 cm monocrystal thin slice. Compressing a 10 cm** 10 cm** 1 cm ling bone thin slice into a monocrystal thin slice results in a volume of exactly 3 cm** 3 cm** 1 cm. Therefore, it can be concluded that the efficiency of the Para brand warp energy compressor is comparable to that of a psychic engine, and in some respects, even surpasses it. When Pad experimented with this device in the warp, he unexpectedly discovered a peculiar phenomenon. When 6 monocrystal thin slices formed a cubic enclosed space in the warp, this cube would not be swept away by the surrounding warp energy. It was like a nail driven into a riverbed, the flowing warp energy washed over it, disturbed it, pushed it, yet it remained firmly fixed in place, neither displacing nor vibrating in place, as if it had entered a state of absolute stillness. Pad used the engineering ship as a reference to measure the monocrystal cube, and finally concluded. This thing was indeed in a state of absolute stillness. It remained still not only relative to the engineering ship but also to the warp itself. This discovery delighted the Palu Boy and Gretchen scholars involved in the research, and Pad even called it the Para Empire's greatest discovery. When Lin Yo saw this content, he subconsciously thought of something. Pakadu, how do I feel that the characteristics of the monocrystal cube are somewhat similar to the webway? The webway is located in the warp and is also in a static state. Yes, it's no exaggeration to say that we have touched upon the core technology of the webway. The idea I just had is related to us building new webways ourselves. Lin Yo's eyes lit up, and words of praise burst out. Building our own webway? Haha, Pakadu, you're a damn genius. Chapter 349, Self-Constructed Webway. A self-constructed webway. The very phrase sounds like it would consume a lot of monocrystals. But thinking about it from a different perspective yields a different feeling. The Para Empire's monocrystals are centrally stored in the underground treasury of Para Home. In the future, 500 billion Para standing armies will need to be built, and over 1,000 Para brand infinite circuits will need to be powered. All in all, the warehouse must constantly store over 10 billion tons of monocrystals to meet daily needs. Such a large quantity of monocrystals would occupy a significant amount of space in Para Home. We could entirely send them into the warp, cover them with PAL shadow, and build them into a warp warehouse similar to a webway. When idle, these monocrystals would serve as a warp warehouse for storing various high turnover materials, ready for immediate use and return to their place after use. In times of war, the warp warehouse could be transformed into a warp fortress or warp outpost, working with PAL shadow to counter enemies on the warp level. Thinking this way, doesn't the cost of building our own webway become much cheaper? Pakadu, have Pad develop a warp structure that combines strategic reserve and strategic utility. We will use it in PAL shadow to store monocrystals and other high turnover materials in peacetime, and transform it into a strategic facility to defend against enemies during war. Such a structure must prioritize safety first, and then its power. Yes, Pakadu noted the weird boy's request on his data slate and asked. Then are we still attacking the Eldar? Lin Yo paced, hands behind his back, pondering. Pause the attacks on the Eldar. Recall the fleet and hand it over to Pad to assist him in completing the warp energy compressor experiment. I have a premonition that when we begin to extract warp energy on a large scale, the Chaos Gods, Huang Pitzi and the Eldar will react. Additionally, have PAL Academy create another land boy, named Pa specifically responsible for researching the infinite circuit. Yes, Pakadu noted the key points and asked again. You just mentioned that Aelna told your envoy that the Eldar and Huang Pitzi plan to forcibly transfer a portion of the Chaos God's power into our sub-universe. How do you plan to respond? Lin Yo stopped, took a hoe from Zalger, and said. The response is, before they transfer it, we will enter the end times early and dump the mess of the rebellion era onto them. Additionally, I will find an opportunity to go to the end times soon to understand the specific situation there and see how Huang Pitzi and the Eldar will transfer the power of the evil gods. If there's a chance, I don't mind interfering with their actions to buy time for our Para Empire to migrate to the end times. Understood, I will urge Pad and Pa to complete their research tasks as soon as possible and design the most perfect construction plan for the Para standing army. Lin Yo and Pakadu discussed some details, then returned to the Weird Boy shack. After becoming an orc true god, the sub-universe no longer restricts Wadaic simulation targets. Being in the rebellion era, one can still possess orcs in the end times. This method of crossing sub-universes is far more efficient than using dimensional pipes deep within the warp. Lin Yo clicked on the simulation interface and manually searched for simulation targets. I want to possess an orc who is located in the Imperial dark side of the end times sub-universe, has enough orc boys under his command, and preferably possesses at least one warship and ample supplies. Searching for simulation targets. Search complete. Search results, 155 items. So many? It seems there are quite a few organized orc forces in the Imperial dark side of the end times. Lin Yo said. Sort by the number of subordinates and the number of ships, from highest to lowest. The number of ships has a higher weight than the number of subordinates. Sorting complete. Search result 1. Name, Scarlet Hand, Batarax. Description. This is the boss of the Scarlet Hand Warband, possessing 6 warships, including 1 battleship, 1 cruiser and 4 guardsmen, totaling 3 million orc boys. The Scarlet Hand operates in the Cronus expanse of the Imperial dark side, is currently on the Imperium of Man's bounty list, and recently finished a battle with the Rotten Stuff. Search result 2. Name, Forged Steel, Yasumin Far. Description. Boss of the Forged Steel Warband, possessing 5 warships, all guardsmen, totaling 2.2 million orc boys. Forged Steel's home world is located at the southern end of the Storm Starfield, precisely at the border between the Imperial Dark Side and the Imperial Bright Side. The Forged Steel Warband's main enemies are the rotten stuff pouring out of the warp rifts. Currently, they are fighting to defend their home world. From top to bottom, Lin Yo could only exclaim that the end times were truly chaotic. In the Rebellion era, the Orcs' enemies were either Shrimp, Eldar, or some short-sighted Xenos. But in the end times, on the same battlefield, 3 or even more factions often appeared. For example, there was an Orc warband called Black Blade. It was fighting a Space Marine warband of the Imperium of Man on one side, facing obstruction from the Necron on the other, while at the same time, the Space Marine warband was also fighting the Necron. When the 3 sides were in a chaotic battle, nearby demons rushed over to join the fun, thus forming a 4-way melee. The same situation played out in various parts of the Imperial Dark Side, only the participating factions would change. Some were Gretchen, Greenskins, Skeletons, and Eldar in a melee, others were Greenskins, Skeletons, and Gretchen together beating up the rotten stuff. In short, the Imperial Dark Side of the end times was primarily characterized by chaos. The Imperium of Man's forces in the Dark Side were mainly the fearless inquisitorial teams, Inquisitors, rogue traders, and various warbands rejected by the mainstream Imperial forces. Lin Yo thought carefully and decided that the Scarlet Hand warband was the most suitable for him. This warband was furthest from Terra, located at the easternmost edge of the Far East starfield, making it easiest to snowball. The other Orc forces faced too much direct combat pressure, or the battle situation was unfavorable, and he would need extra monocrystals to turn the tide, making the cost-effectiveness of possession lower. After repeatedly confirming that the simulation target was the optimal solution, Lin Yo began the simulation. Your simulation target is an Orc warband boss in the end times. The base consumption for the simulation is 1 million tons of monocrystals. The simulation target possesses 3 million Orc boys. Simulation consumption increases by 3 million tons of monocrystals. The simulation target possesses 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, and 4 guardsmen. Simulation consumption increases by 950,000 tons of monocrystals. The simulation target is in a severely wounded state. Simulation consumption decreases by 50%. The final simulation price is 100 plus 300 plus 95, asterisk 50% equals 2.475 million tons of monocrystals. Do you want to start the simulation? Severely wounded state? Lin Yo raised an eyebrow, did not hesitate, and silently thought. Confirm start simulation. His consciousness left the weird boy's body, passed through the webway outer wall, and directly entered the warp. After a short period of rapid travel, his consciousness arrived in a part of the warp without star beacon light and encountered a green-skinned fleet emitting thick smoke. He plunged into the battleship's bridge, and his vision went black. Opening his eyes, he looked at the chest of his current body, and a gaping, bloody hole came into view. A mad doctor beside him was scratching his head in frustration at the gruesome wound. Boss, things are not looking good. The rotten stuff seems to have cast some kind of psyker on your wound. My potion is useless on you. The mad doctor picked up a bottle of alchemical potion, uncorked it, and poured the liquid onto the wound. The potion quickly merged with the blood, bringing a burning pain that caused Lin Yo's nerves to twitch slightly, but it produced no healing effect. Boss, you see, it's not that my potion has a problem, it's that the psyker cast by the rotten stuff is too insidious. It transforms my potion into some kind of blood toxin, accelerating the deterioration of the injury. Lin Yo waved his hand, telling the mad doctor to leave, and his gaze extended to the boys below the command platform. With their boss on the verge of death, some restless boys were preparing to usurp power, just waiting for the boss to breathe his last. Lin Yo's gaze coldly swept over the restless boys, and he snorted, saying, I won't die. Just now, I received a blessing from the Orc god, Brother Li. Brother Li said he has something for me to do, so he can't let me die like this. Open your eyes wide and witness Brother Li's miracle. Lin Yo closed his eyes, muttering to himself, repeatedly chanting phrases like Brother Li is awesome. He opened the system interface in his mind and selected Orc gene simulation. Using his current body as the experimental subject, Lin Yo implanted the ancient Orc gene, which possesses super self-healing abilities, into his body, and also implanted the parapsyker field gene fragment, which every Palu boy possesses. The parapsyker field first appeared on his body. As the psyker field expanded from the inside out, the psyker lingering on the wound was pushed out. It was a crimson light with malice, as viscous as dried blood, and as foul-smelling as a stubborn stone in a cesspit. The parapsyker field annihilated, crushed, and obliterated it, finally turning into a wisp of green smoke that disappeared in the bridge. Subsequently, the ancient Orc's self-healing gene began to take effect. The hole in his chest had a diameter exceeding 50 centimeters. In just half a minute, this wound, which would have kept the Mad Doctor team busy for a while, healed on its own. Hiss! A gasp echoed in the bridge. Orcs' self-healing abilities were already impressive, but that was predicated on not losing their head or having their heart rotten. The boss's heart in his chest was long gone, and he had only survived until now by sheer willpower, but now, out of nothing, 2 hearts and 3 lungs appeared, and he was as good as new. This was simply a miracle. Da-da-da footsteps approached quickly. A weird boy ran over quickly, staff in hand, and knelt with a thud before the warband boss, raising his arm and shouting. Brother Lee is awesome. Brother Lee is cool and mighty. As a weird boy, he could clearly feel the orc true god Brother Lee descending upon his boss. With the weird boy leading the way, the boys below the command platform immediately shouted Brother Lee, the sound waves rising one after another. Lin Yo felt his physical condition, nodded slightly in satisfaction. He stood up and stretched his body. The weird boy scrambled up, scurrying to his side. All right, quiet. Lin Yo raised his hand to quiet them and asked. Who can tell me what the situation in the expanse is now? The weird boy bowed respectfully. Boss, let me introduce the situation in the expanse. After the light of the great fire went out, the rotten stuff cultists held sacrifice rituals on the imperial worlds in the expanse, opening warp rifts and summoning demons to reality. When we previously plundered an imperial world, we were ambushed by the rotten stuff army, which is why you were injured. Lin Yo listened patiently, gradually understanding the current state of the imperial dark side. It was currently the latter half of the 999th year of the 41st millennium, with 3 months remaining until the 42nd millennium. After the Great Rift unfolded, the star beacon light disappeared from the expanse, and the expanse completely lost contact with Terra. Local psychers and navigators could not obtain any valid information from the warp. Greenskin's warp travel did not rely on the star beacon's light, it entirely depended on the skill of the navigating weird boy. The Scarlet Hand's navigating boy was quite skilled. Taking advantage of the shrimp's isolation, they maneuvered and plundered fiercely within the expanse. Initially, they were unstoppable, but later, as the chaos cultists grew increasingly rampant and the rotten stuff frequently appeared, the Scarlet Hand began to suffer setbacks. Lin Yo listened to the weird boy's narration while walking to the viewport to observe the warp in the imperial dark side. According to Pad's research report, the warp appears chaotic and disordered, but in fact, disorder itself contains certain patterns. Without external interference, the flow of warp energy follows the guidance of an 8-pointed star, meaning the 4 colors red, blue, green, and purple always converge towards the 4 directions around the observer. If the flow direction of any color does not align with the 8-pointed star, it indicates that there is an event in that direction attracting that color, possibly a sacrifice ritual or large-scale non-sacrificial activities, such as war. The current expanse had clearly become a paradise for demons. Everywhere there was warp energy attracted by large-scale casualties, and the environment for warp travel was extremely harsh. Lin Yo thought for a moment and commanded. Return to reality, find a secluded place to rest, I need to deeply modify the fleet. Yes, Dada. I'll arrange it right away. A few minutes later, the fleet returned to reality and hid in a desolate asteroid belt. Lin Yo activated gene simulation, rapidly modifying the boys and Gretchen of the Scarlet Hand warband. The modification template was based on the Blood Raven Kid, as this type of para-orcs was most suitable for exploration work in unfamiliar areas. Days later, the modifications were complete. Lin Yo consumed monocrystals, opened a portal to the Age of Apostasy, brought 5 access devices, and installed them in the bridges of various ships. He found a nearby webway gate marked safe by an access device and entered it. Half an hour passed, and Lin Yo led the fleet out of the gate, his expression grim. The webway of the end times was truly no place for anyone to stay. Webway demons, warp storms, chaos space marines, and evil warp creatures emerged endlessly. On the surface, that webway gate looked intact, but it was actually a trap set by the chaos gods to lure para-orcs and Brother Lee. As soon as Lin Yo entered, he encountered the demon army that had been waiting for him. The moment they spoke, they called out Lin Yo by name, clearly having anticipated that the orc true god would enter the webway of the end times. Was this a coincidence? No, it was not a coincidence. Lin Yo tried several other webway gates, but still encountered the premeditated demon armies. One of these demon armies' leaders even shouted the following. Orc true god, you won't make waves in the end times. The cosmic hall has been destroyed by us. The webway belongs to the demons. Regardless of whether the cosmic hall was truly destroyed or not. Lin Yo mused that building their own webway in the end times was the only option for the Para Empire. Chapter 350, Para Webway Seminar. Days flew by as they explored the expanded zone of the end times and observed Pad and Pa Ertie's experiments. Half a month later. In the open space in front of the weird boy's shack at Para Home, Lin Yo and a group of Palu boys sat on the ground. Pad, you go first and introduce the experimental status of the warp energy compressor. Yes, Dada. Pad, wearing a coarse cloth robe, stood up and walked into the center of the circle formed by the boys, looking around as he said. Boys, no more nonsense, let's directly observe the effect of the latest generation compressor. Pad gestured to Peng Pa in the amniotic tank, help me project the scene of the warp. All right. Peng Pa nodded, closed his eyes, and projected the warp scene he observed onto the holographic display. The holographic device hung in the air, casting a holographic image onto the ground, right in front of Pad. Pad sat down, avoiding blocking the view of the surrounding boys. In the image, a giant device, resembling Mao Ge's King Kong, was operating. It spread its arms, its head forward, and its mouth wide open, in a roaring posture. Warp energy was drawn into the device through the super-cool siphon engine in its nasal cavity. The tech boy operating the device opened its chest cavity, exposing the intricate structure within for everyone present to observe. 4 kinds of warp energy, red, blue, purple, and green, flowed like docile sheep in the energy pipelines. After passing through the filter, the 4 colors of energy entered 4 separate pipelines, without any mixing. They entered 4 pre-processing containers, where low-concentration anti-psyker medium sterilized them. The target of sterilization was not contaminants from reality like bacteria, but the emotions contained within the warp energy. To prevent the anti-psyker medium from excessively neutralizing the warp energy, the duration of sterilization had to be precisely controlled. After about 10 seconds, the first batch of warp energy completed sterilization. Before entering the device, this batch of warp energy had a volume of 1005 cubic meters. After completing sterilization, its volume dropped precisely to 1000 cubic meters, demonstrating the extremely precise calculation level of Pad's team. Applause broke out on the scene, then quickly subsided as everyone continued to watch the demonstration. After sterilization, the warp energy in the 4 pipelines became pure and clear, without a trace of emotion. They gathered in the energy hub and were compressed by a 3-stage particle accelerator. In the first stage of compression, shockwaves formed by monocrystal powder would use a method similar to blow molding to squeeze the warp energy into a mold, roughly compressing it into a plate shape. In the second stage of compression, a monocrystal punch would strike the warp energy plate, causing its microscopic structure to become loose while maintaining its plate-like appearance. The third stage of compression was the most crucial one. Anti-psyker medium pulses of a specific frequency reshaped the microscopic structure of the warp energy plate, manually arranging the energy particles. Due to the use of anti-psyker medium, there would be warp energy loss during the third stage of compression. After waiting for about a minute, the 3-stage compression process was completed. The device's mouth sprayed a stream of air, expelling the warp energy compressed into a monocrystal plate. The tech boy measured the monocrystal plate and obtained a string of data. Total volume was 400 cubic meters. 1005 cubic meters of warp energy were ultimately compressed to obtain 400 cubic meters of monocrystal. Converted to mass, that was 2,000 tons. The compression rate was 40%, an increase of 10% compared to the 30% at the beginning of the experiment, which was very gratifying. Pad then demonstrated the effect of rapid, large-scale compression of warp energy. 10 compression devices worked at full capacity simultaneously for 3 hours. While waiting for the results, Pa-Erty came to the center of the field to introduce his team's experimental achievements. Pad and Pa-Erty were in the same vein, possessing Lan's style and character. After Pa-Erty took the stage, he immediately began a live demonstration without further ado. A second holographic image appeared before everyone, this time set in reality. It was a space outpost built from monocrystal. Every piece of external armor was monocrystal, forming a sealed space that excluded many negative factors such as cosmic background radiation and warp interference. At the same time, because it was located in reality, the psyker rituals in this outpost could communicate with the warp, though the effect was somewhat weakened due to the presence of the monocrystal shell. At the core of the outpost was a giant green mushroom. Its height was 1,000 meters, the diameter of its stem was about 500 meters, and the diameter of its cap was about 200 meters, making it look both slender and sturdy. Standing beneath the mushroom and looking up, the glittering fluorescent spores in the gills were particularly striking. 2 teams of Palu boys appeared on either side of the giant mushroom, one on the left and one on the right. One team wore blue armor, the other wore red. The 2 sides exchanged fire with heavy bolters, fighting fiercely. Bang! The red orc boy suffered casualties, an unlucky one was hit in the goggles and died on the spot. The camera view shifted upwards. The giant mushroom's folds emitted a faint green light, and luminous threads moved along the wrinkles, converging towards one of the fluorescent spores. The spore rapidly grew larger, eventually detaching naturally like a ripe apple, performing a free fall. Here came the exciting part. As the spore fell, many small holes would open on its stem. Alchemical potions, alchemical mists, alchemical injectors, and many other things that promoted spore growth were precisely sprayed onto the spore. Tens of seconds later, the spore landed. By this time, it had already turned into a small mushroom with a cap. Its cap was genetically modified to have a highly porous, high-damping structure, using friction to mitigate the impact of the fall. After the mushroom landed, it blossomed within 5 seconds, and a brand new red orc boy was freshly produced. The biological armor and biological weapons on him provided the most basic protection. On the surface of the biological armor, there was a protrusion resembling a mechanical buckle. After this object emitted a pulse wave at the corpse on the ground, the power armor on the corpse automatically detached, breaking into parts, which were then bound by the protrusion's miniature tractor beam and quickly assembled onto the Orc Boy's biological armor. From the Red Orc Boy's casualty to the Red Orc Boy's reinforcement, it took about 3 minutes in total. This infantry speed could only be described as astonishing. Of course, in actual combat, the reinforcement speed would be greatly reduced. On one hand, the combat location would generally not be directly below the giant mushroom, so it would take some time for reinforcements to reach the battlefield. On the other hand, the environmental parameters of the giant mushroom might not be ideal. The current environmental parameters were standard atmospheric pressure, normal temperature, Terra gravity, and zero psyker interference. In actual combat, for every additional interference factor, the reinforcement speed would slow down by at least a factor of 2. But no matter what, Pa-Erdy's experimental results were commendable. This giant mushroom was the green orc version of the infinite circuit. Clap, clap, clap. Everyone applauded in celebration. Next was to wait for some time to check the effect of the warp energy compressor operating at full capacity in batch mode. Linyo raised his hand to signal everyone to be quiet and said, "The reason I called everyone here today is not only to check the experimental results of Pat and Pa-Erdy, but also to discuss an important matter with everyone." Linyo gestured to Pakadu. Pakadu understood, stood up, walked to the center of the field, and explained about Huang Pitzi and Eldar transferring the power of the evil gods to the rebellion era, then announced the plan for the Para Empire to enter the end times. The plan currently only had a framework and core points, with other parts to be supplemented, which was also the purpose of Linyo gathering everyone for a brainstorm today. Pakadu sat down, and Linyo spoke. "Before most members of the Para Empire transfer over, our pioneering force must first establish the Para Webway. I want to ask everyone, what do you think are the flaws of the old one's webway?" Linyo scanned around. The boys whose gazes he met were eager to speak, seemingly having long been dissatisfied with the old one's webway. "How about this, let's go one by one. Along, you are the commander of the Para home garrison, defending our nation. I want to hear your opinion first." Along sat in the last row. There was no other way, he was too tall. He pounded his chest and said, "Da, the old one's webway's weapon system is very unreliable. Its control authority has serious loopholes, so many people can use it. I think if we are to install strategic weapons in the Para webway, the control must be in Dada's hands." Along's tone was indignant, seemingly still bothered by the Eldar's attack on Para home last time. Linyo nodded. "Along is right, the strategic weapons and other strategic facilities of the Para webway must be in my control. Beast, what are your thoughts?" Beast folded his arms, adopting the posture of a thinker, and pondered as he spoke. "Boss, I think the old one's webway's transit efficiency is too low. Compared to warp travel, it is indeed very fast, but not fast enough. I just happened to think of an idea recently." "Oh? Tell me about it." "Alright, boss, I'll demonstrate it with a holographic model. It's not something that can be explained in a few words." Beast stood up and went to the panel of the holographic device to operate it. "My ling bone comes from a Dragon Gate frame, which is the kind of engineering facility used to quickly transfer containers. Perhaps we can build the Para webway in the form of a Dragon Gate frame with numerous containers." The third holographic image appeared. Beast placed a Dragon Gate frame in the image, with containers piled up like small mountains on both sides. "Suppose we have a troop assembled in Container A. The destination of this troop is Container Z. There are tens of thousands of light years between these two containers. If we take the old one's webway, the troop in Container A must first find an effective path to reach Container Z, which would take a lot of time." Beast pressed a button on the holographic device, and the Dragon Gate frame in the image began to move. "Suppose our Para webway has a command and dispatch center that can control the Dragon Gate frame, grab Container A, and place it near Z, temporarily connecting the spaces within the two containers. Then the troop in Container A can reach their destination without having to explore routes or undertake long journeys." Everyone's eyes lit up. Pat and Pa-Erdy exchanged glances, whispering to each other, looking somewhat excited. Beast said, "This design has two advantages. Firstly, the command and dispatch authority are all in the boss's hands, so there's no need to worry about the Para webway being occupied by bad stuff. Secondly, transportation is quick and convenient, and the combat troops no longer have to undertake reconnaissance work, allowing them to focus their energy on combat. As for the disadvantages, I think the Dragon Gate frame design is quite difficult. Anyway, with my brain, I can't come up with a design plan." Linyo smiled and said, "Good, Beast, your inspiration has good feasibility. Pat, Pa-Erdy, what do you two think?" Beast returned to his seat. Pat and Pa-Erdy stood up simultaneously and said in unison, "Da, Boss Beast's conjecture is actually a mature theory in the field of communication, called cross-node all-to-all communication technology, mainly used in ultra-high-speed, large-throughput, low-latency communication solutions between thinker arrays. Once professional knowledge was involved, the Palu boys started to get confused. Fortunately, Linyo, as a modern person, had a relatively high acceptance of human technology and could follow their train of thought. Elaborate on it, as simply as possible. Alright, boss, I'll explain, and Pa-Erdi will demonstrate. Pad and Pa-Erdi divided the work, one went to the center of the field, and the other went to operate the panel of the holographic device. Simply put, it's like this. During cross-node communication, communication between nodes relies on different Dragon Gate frames, while communication within a node is done using the old one's webway transit method. At the same time, within the node, there are mobile Dragon Gate frames that can move across nodes, which are uniformly dispatched by the Dragon Gate frames responsible for internode communication. The Palu boys were listening as if to a heavenly book. Linyo also felt dizzy from listening. Adhering to the principle of professional matters are left to professionals, non-professionals should not interfere, Linyo asked. Pad, compared to the old one's webway, what do you think about the construction difficulty and maintenance cost of this scheme? The difficulty of implementing cross-node all-to-all communication technology is actually lower than that of the old one's webway, but its maintenance cost is higher than the old one's webway. In exchange, the transit efficiency of this technology is about 15 times that of the old one's webway, 50% lower than the flushing device which achieves ultra-long distance deployment using quantum entanglement technology, but its usage cost is at least 90% lower than flushing. Words alone were not enough, experimental results were needed. If you start the experiment now, how long will it take for you two to produce experimental results? Linyo asked. Pad looked at the warp energy compressor that was undergoing batch compression. There are still more than 2 hours until the batch compression experiment of the compressor ends. We can build a simple para-webway device for you within 2 hours and demonstrate its effect on site. Linyo raised an eyebrow. Good, then you two get to work. We can use this time to discuss the end times development plan here. Alright, Pad and Pa-Erdi used data pads to send messages, remotely directing their teams to conduct experiments. 2 hours later, a star beacon radiating green light rose from the ground in the holographic image, followed by a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. Chapter 351, Green-Skinned Frenzy. Is this a parastar beacon summoned by a shiny boy? Yes, as you can see, Pa-Erdi and I gathered 5,000 shiny boys, divided them into 5 groups, 1,000 in each group, corresponding to 1 parastar beacon. The psychic light intensity of these star beacons is far less than that of Shrimp Star Beacon, but this approach of winning by quantity rather than quality is the correct way to use star beacons. Pad said respectfully. These 5 parastar beacons you see now are the Dragon Gate frames of the para-webway. Their appearance and form are far from the true Dragon Gate frames, but their purpose is the same. Please watch our demonstration. Pa-Erdi pressed the button on the data pad. The engineering ship on the holographic screen placed a square container in the warp. This thing was assembled from single crystal plates and was in a state of absolute stillness, similar to a single webway space. For convenience, Pa-Erdi labeled this item and named it Single Crystal Cabin. Previous experiments showed that the single crystal cabin would not be affected by chaotic warp energy and remained in a static state. This meant that even if it was casually thrown into a corner, it would still be there 100 years later. To a large extent, the single crystal cabin could be used to create warp beacons. The 5 parastar beacons erected by Pad in the warp used the single crystal cabin as their base. Above the base was a relatively simple psychic acceleration cylinder, with shiny boys placed inside, and through layers of acceleration and pressurization, the PAL shadow could be scattered in the form of a light beam. This light beam was equivalent to a magnet. When it landed on the single crystal cabin and attracted another magnet inside the cabin, something magical happened. The single crystal cabin moved. Due to the attraction between the magnets, the single crystal cabin was pushed by the internal magnet, approaching the parastar beacon at a speed far exceeding conventional warp travel. After reaching its first destination, it was then attracted by the light of another star beacon, rapidly advancing to the next destination. The 5 parastar beacons took turns attracting the single crystal cabin, perfectly completing the first cycle. Pa-Erdi pressed the button. The engineering ship continuously deployed 4 single crystal cabins, a total of 5 single crystal cabins, moving back and forth smoothly between the 5 parastar beacons. Pa-Erdi pressed the button again. The engineering ship deployed 100 single crystal cabins in the center of the space enclosed by the 5 parastar beacons, forming a single crystal cabin matrix, like neatly stacked containers on a dock. And that wasn't all. The engineering ship flew 360 degrees around the single crystal cabin matrix, placing a row of parastar beacons above, below, left, right, front, and back of the matrix. The parastar beacons formed a loose cubic frame structure around the single crystal cabin matrix, coordinating with each other to transfer the single crystal cabins in the matrix. The scene was dazzling, yet there was no lag or conflict, appearing seamless. The most amazing thing was that the Peristar beacons, which served as the Dragon Gate frames, could also be transferred by other Peristar beacons. The process was similar to the transfer of single crystal cabins, both relying on the attraction between star beacons. So, the question was, how did this attraction come about? The answer was simple. If a shiny boy's head was split in half, and the left and right brains were placed separately, psychic and quantum level attraction would naturally form between them. In reality, such brains could be used to make screaming boxes. In the warp, they were the source of attraction for the Dragon Gate frame and the single crystal cabin. After Pat and Pa-Erty's demonstration, the people present were impressed, vaguely understanding what cross-node full-to-full communication technology meant. However, Lienyo had a small question. Pat, Pa-Erty, I can understand the concept of this technology, but there's a problem. The transfer of single crystal cabins between Peristar beacons seems faster than conventional warp travel, but I always feel that this transfer method is still warp travel, not as convenient as the webway. After all, the transfer of single crystal cabins also takes a lot of time, right? You are right. Next, Pa-Erty and I will reveal the most crucial secret of the webway. Pad bowed slightly, looked around, and said. I believe everyone has noticed a phenomenon. We start from a webway node located in the westernmost part of the galaxy, and after passing through a few webway gates, we can reach the easternmost part of the galaxy. How is this effect of crossing the galaxy by passing through only a few gates achieved? Please look here. Pa-Erty, switch the view to the inside of the single crystal cabin. Alright. The holographic screen changed, from showing the single crystal cabin matrix to the inside of a certain single crystal cabin. There was a warp exit leading to reality here. As soon as Lienyo saw this exit, he suddenly realized, even feeling a tingling sensation on his scalp. Yes, that's right. The single crystal cabin was indeed attracted by the Peristar beacon, but its internal warp exit would not close because of this. Suppose, single crystal cabin A had a warp exit leading to the westernmost part of the galaxy. Then, when it moved in the warp, its warp exit still corresponded to the westernmost part of the galaxy. The Para-team opened a warp entrance in the eastern part of the galaxy and entered single crystal cabin B. Single crystal cabin B, under the traction of the Peristar beacon, docked with single crystal cabin A. The Para-team in single crystal cabin A passed through the warp exit, arrived in reality, and instantly reached the westernmost part of the galaxy. This was the secret of the webway's ability to quickly transfer within the galaxy. The old one's webway required the Para-team to find the correct path and exit themselves. The Para-webway constructed by Pat and Pa-Erty could omit the team's pathfinding and trial and error process, with the Peristar beacon uniformly dispatching and directly transporting the team to the correct exit. The efficiency gap between these two types of webways was obvious. Excellent, Pat, Pa-Erty, your plan is satisfactory. Beast, your idea is also good. Lienyo nodded with a smile and asked. So, what are the flaws of this plan? There are, Pad switched the holographic image, and the single crystal cabin matrix and Peristar beacon appeared on the screen. The screen focused on one of the Peristar beacons. The appearance of this star beacon seems no different from other star beacons, but it is actually the most crucial one. It is the origin in the entire coordinate system, and all spatial parameters of Peristar beacons and single crystal cabins are calculated based on it. Lienyo pondered. That is to say, we need to protect it well. If it is destroyed, we might lose the origin of the coordinate system, leading to the collapse of the entire webway system, is that right? Yes, Pa-Erty and I have thought of two solutions. Pad pulled up a separate holographic screen and listed their ideas on it. The first solution is that we can anchor an indestructible celestial body in reality, record its physical coordinates, and build a Peristar beacon in its corresponding warp. The second solution is to find an indestructible warp landscape in the warp, record its warp coordinates, and build a Peristar beacon. These two solutions can be adopted simultaneously, forming a double insurance. In reality, an indestructible celestial body. In the warp, an indestructible warp landscape. Lienyo pondered for a moment and blurted out. Then the most suitable construction site, wouldn't it be the Eye of Terror? Yes, Lienyo took a slight breath, gradually realizing that he needed to go to the Eye of Terror in the end times. The foundation of the Para Empire was warp energy single crystals, which meant that Para-orcs were forever bound to the warp. The warp could exist without chaos gods, but the warp must exist, otherwise the Para Empire would not be able to obtain warp energy to make single crystals. Since the warp must exist forever, the Eye of Terror would naturally also be perpetual, fully meeting the construction requirements for the Peristar beacon. In addition, conquering the Eye of Terror was an important step in eliminating the chaos gods. From this, it was not difficult to conclude that the Eye of Terror was the Para Empire's current contested territory. Bring up the end times galaxy planar map. Yes, Pad operated it, and several holographic screens merged into a vast galaxy planar map. The Great Rift that would appear in the future was also added to the planar map. It extended from the upper left corner of the map to the lower right, dividing the galaxy into two, with the Eye of Terror located in the middle of this rift, closer to the upper left. The Imperium Nihilus became a breeding ground for rotten things, with billions of rotten things being born there every day. To conquer the Eye of Terror, one must first cut off the supply lines of rotten things in the Imperium Nihilus, prevent them from multiplying, until they are eliminated. Looking at the Paris-star beacon again, this thing could not only be used to transfer single crystal cabins but also as a normal star beacon. Lianyo narrowed his eyes, had an idea, and turned to look at Gold Coin, the Dean of Pal Academy, who was sitting beside him. How is the green-skinned frenzy plan progressing? Gold Coin was deep in thought, his face serious. Hearing Dada's question, he suddenly came back to his senses, prostrated himself, and performed a grand salute before saying, Dada, the key technical problems of the green-skinned frenzy plan have been solved. We have invented a mutagenic spore that can spread among fungi, plants, mammals, shrimp, and humanoid aliens. This spore has the environmental adaptability of paraspores, and it sacrifices half of its life cycle for better spread speed and infection success rate. While speaking, Gold Coin took out his data pad, opened a document, and presented it with both hands to the weird boy. Lianyo read it carefully, full of admiration for this Gretchen scholar from the Peijing Avengers Alliance. The green-skinned frenzy plan, in simple terms, was to spread the green-skinned plague. The genetic fragments of infected individuals would undergo targeted mutation under the action of mutagenic spores. In the most ideal scenario, the infected individual would transform into a Paraboy, Paragretchen, or Parasquig with approximately 35% genetic purity within 10 teradays, depending on which mutation path the infected individual was more suitable for. Small mammals like cats and dogs would generally mutate into Parasquigs. Shrimp had a higher probability of becoming boys and Gretchen. Large individuals like ogrins would become strong Paraboys, and their genetic purity would also be higher than other types of infected individuals. Mutagenic spores had various transmission routes. Non-etheric nullifiers could be infected through common routes such as air, droplets, blood, and bodily fluids. Etheric nullifiers, when communicating with the warp, had a certain chance of being infected if they accidentally touched a pal shadow. It was very difficult to immunize and resist mutagenic spores. The Dark Eldar's gene mask could keep mutagenic spores out. The Eldar's ling bone, Space Marine's filter grills, and Oil Boy's logic conduits and simulated skin could also resist mutagenic spores to a certain extent. At the end of the report presented by Gold Coin, PAL Academy predicted the prospects of mutagenic spores. They believed that in nest capitals and industrial worlds lacking medical and health care, the infection success rate of mutagenic spores would reach over 90%, and once the first infected person appeared, that world would be occupied by Paraboys within 3 months, forming an armed force that could be called upon at any time. In other Imperial worlds, Alien worlds, Death worlds, and Rotten Thing worlds, the infection success rate ranged from 10% to 90%. Wait, Rotten Thing worlds also had a 10% infection rate? Lianyo was slightly stunned and asked. Rotten Thing worlds should be full of rotten things, right? Why is there a 10% infection success rate? Gold Coin pushed up his glasses, and the lenses perfectly refracted a bright light under the illumination. Dada, you don't know, this 10% infection success rate comes from Nurgle rotten things. The more Nurgle rotten things there are in a rotten thing world, the higher the infection success rate of mutagenic spores, even reaching up to 90%. Nurgle rotten things had many fungal tissues and plants on them, so their success rate of being infected by mutagenic spores would naturally be higher than other rotten things. Lianyo asked. Then, after the infected Nurgle rotten things turn into Paraboys, can they obey our commands? Gold Coin nodded first, then shook his head. They will obey our commands, but not completely. After their genetic purity exceeds 30%, their bodies will obey our commands, but their souls will still maintain contact with Nurgle. Most Nurgle rotten things show signs of personality splitting after being infected. They act according to our commands on one hand, and on the other hand, they refuse our commands and obey Nurgle's directives. Lianyo turned to look at Pad, who understood and nodded slightly. Dada, you guessed right, this soul-level connection can be severed by Pal Shadow. I reckon a Parastar beacon composed of hundreds of millions of shiny boys should be able to cut off the connection between a certain planet and Nurgle from hundreds of light years away. This way, after the Nurgle rotten things on the planet mutate into Paraboys, they can be used by you. Gold Coin added. Other rotten things can also have their connection with their masters severed in this way, but the infection success rate is not as high as with Nurgle rotten things. Lianyo took a deep breath, his thoughts churning, but he remained calm. A broad road to conquering the Eye of Terror slowly unfolded before him. Pakadu. Dada, please instruct. Write down everything we just discussed, summarize it, and submit it to me as a plan. Pad, Pa and PAL Academy will cooperate with your work. The name of the plan will be Green-Skinned Frenzy. Chapter 352, Practical Combat Test. The Green Orc Tide plan had numerous prerequisites. While Pakido was drafting the plan, Lin Yo intended to test each prerequisite in the end times to see if they held true. He used the simulated companion function to create a sub-account for the beast in the Crimson Hand, allowing him to act alongside himself. Neng. I feel like the warp in the end times seems even more chaotic than during the rebellion era. The beast, possessing an orc bodyguard, observed the scenery outside the viewport and couldn't help but exclaim. Lin Yo, embodying the warlord of the Crimson Hand, beckoned to a weird boy nearby and instructed. Open the star map we've already explored. Alright, boss. The weird boy personally operated the star map, explaining the intelligence to the orc god. A year ago, there were 35 shrimp worlds in this expansion area, one forging world of the oil boys, and approximately over 100 spatial entities distributed along the trade routes. There were about 300 lost worlds not subjugated by the Shrimp Empire, and around 200 worlds occupied by Xeno civilization. As of today, except for the forging world, all other worlds belonging to the Shrimp Empire have been invaded by rotten things, and more than half of the shrimp worlds have fallen into rotten thing worlds. The lost worlds and Xenos worlds are pretty much in the same situation. Lin Yo asked. Among the Xenos worlds, how many are not silicon-based life forms? The weird boy said. Boss, the mainstream life forms in the Xenos worlds are all silicon-based. Good, the mutagenic spores have great potential. Lin Yo then asked. Which is the closest world to us right now? The weird boy zoomed in on the star map, focusing on the area slightly to the left of the center of the expansion area's flat map. It's an Eldar world called Yalahaya. That place was recently destroyed by Gretchen, so if we go now, we should encounter a nest of Gretchen and some scattered Eldar. Lin Yo frowned and asked. Eldar world? Are you talking about a craft world, or one of those worlds established on a planet? It's a world established on a planet. These Eldar are privateers. They don't have the protection of a craft world, so they can only pioneer on planets. Oh, I see. Lin Yo snapped his fingers at the beast. Go check the fleet's combat readiness. Alright, boss. The beast scurried away. Lin Yo pointed to the Eldar world and gave the order. Proceed to this world immediately, but do not leave the warp after reaching the destination. Yes, boss. The weird boy relayed the order. Lin Yo found an empty warehouse and conducted genetic simulations within it, using materials from his portable warehouse to create fresh mutagenic spores. Considering that the main enemies would be Gretchen and Eldar, Lin Yo optimized the genetic segments of the spores, enhancing the success rate of infecting Gretchen and Eldar. Next was the collection of test strips, containers, and sampling tools necessary for gathering experimental data. These items were readily available, plentiful in the portable warehouse, and could be used as needed. Additionally, the cannon barrels and shells used for spreading the mutagenic spores also needed to be modified. To be safe, Lin Yo summoned a research team from Parahome and guided the tech boys of the Crimson Hand on-site to modify various devices. 5 Terra days later, the fleet arrived in the warp region corresponding to the Eldar world. All teams report self-inspection results. Lin Yo controlled the overall situation from the command console. The noisy box successively broadcasted the voices of the various team leaders. Mutagenic spore shells tallied, total of 5,000, ready for immediate use. Macro cannon modified, changed from direct fire to shotgun style, capable of firing 10 mutagenic spore shells per shot. Salvage ship modified, genetic scanner and tractor beam ready. PAL shadow ready, can shroud the planet within 30 seconds after activation. Lin Yo nodded slightly and signaled to the helmsman kid below. Depart, enter reality. Neng. The helmsman kid turned the helm, opened the warp exit, and led the fleet through. Shortly after arriving in reality, a scan signal appeared on the finder. Boss, it's the Gretchen's auger matrix, they've found us. Scan their fleet status, tell me how many people they have and how many ships. Alright, boss. The Zhao Dongdong boy tapped the keyboard and replied. Boss, the other side only has one battleship. Besides the shrimp driving the ship, all the rest are Gretchen, about 30,000 of them. I haven't seen much, so I don't know which Gretchen warband they're from. The Zhao Dongdong boy projected the scan results onto the holographic screen. A red pattern appeared on the screen, with a white shield and 2 crossed black swords in the center of the pattern, and a scarlet droplet in the middle of the shield. Judging by the style and color scheme of this pattern, it should be related to the Blood Angels. Unfortunately, Lin Yo, as a cloud hammer and a struggling graduate student, didn't have much time to understand the origins, cultures, and characteristics of every Space Marine warband, so he couldn't recognize this warband for a moment. However, considering that this was an edge region of the Imperium, where legitimate Space Marines rarely operated, the probability of them being Chaos Space Marines or Renegade Space Marines was almost 100%. Based on this, Lin Yo had no psychological burden whatsoever about killing the wrong good shrimp or good Gretchen. Just one battleship, and they took down an Eldar world? As expected of Eldar pirates, they're truly weaklings. Lin Yo chuckled and ordered. Open the fire control radar, lock onto the Gretchen's warship, approach it, first spread the mutagenic spores, then deal with the Gretchen. Neng. Lin Yo beckoned to the beast. I'll leave the command of the battle to you, I'll go to the lab to oversee the research. All right, boss. The beast patted his chest and took his boss's place at the command console. Lin Yo turned and entered the corridor, arriving at the temporarily set up laboratory to observe the real-time experimental data. The fleet began sublight speed travel, arriving above a barren planet with an artificial forest. The Eldar here might have been enthusiasts of a primitive forest retro trend. On the earthy brown ground, they artificially created forest gardens, tree houses, and lakes. Their taste was quite good, but their luck was a bit poor, as they encountered the villainous Gretchen. The fleet bypassed the Gretchen's warship and fired shells at the lowest point of the near-surface orbit. The shotgun-style cannon fired 10 shells at once. After a simple 5-round salvo, the artificial forest on the ground was covered in spores. Normally, 5 green orc frigates would definitely have an advantage over 1 Gretchen warship. As long as they had a brain, the Gretchen would definitely choose to flee. But that group of Gretchen, seemingly related to the Blood Angels, did the opposite. They actually piloted their warship straight over and launched a boarding action against a green orc frigate. This dumbfounded the beast. It was hard to imagine a normal person doing such a thing. Oh ho, that's rare, it's not often you see such brave Gretchen. The beast couldn't help but laugh. Bring up the live footage of their boarding action, I want to see how powerful these Gretchen are. Alright. The holographic screen switched to the green orc frigate's surveillance view, and an extremely brutal and bloody scene appeared. The Gretchen, clad in dark red power armor, were like madmen, chasing and wildly slashing the orcs, while also stuffing severed limbs and heads into their mouths, chewing and swallowing greedily. This scene stunned everyone on the bridge. I reckon these Gretchen's mouths smell worse than squigs. Brother Lee above, are the Gretchen crazy? How can they even eat us orcs? Is there any justice left? Beast boss, what do we do now? The orcs on that frigate might not be able to stop these madmen. The boy who spoke was eager to jump over and fight them. The beast scratched his head and said. First, scan how many combat personnel are still on the Gretchen's warship. Neng. I checked, there are no Gretchen left on their ship, only shrimp. The beast's eyes lit up, and he clenched his fist, hitting his palm. Then let's do this, relay my order, detonate the green orc frigate's blue flame furnace, blow up these Gretchen, and then launch a jump boarding tactic to seize their ship. We sacrifice 1 frigate and get back a battleship, this deal is a huge profit. Ga ga ga. Huge profit, huge profit. We've won big. The boys and Gretchen on the bridge cheered. 30 seconds later, a bright plasma fireball exploded in low orbit. 20,000 orcs and 30,000 Gretchen perished together, in exchange for a 50% new Imperial battleship. The beast dispatched a boarding party to board the enemy ship and spread the mutagenic spores. After waiting for half an hour, the shrimp on the ship were converted into Palu boys, and control of the ship fell into the hands of the Peru Empire. By reviewing the data records of the Thinker Array, the beast figured out the origin of this warband. Its name was Blood Knights, separated from the Blood Angels, and it had been labeled as a renegade space marine warband by the Imperium of Man even before the Great Rift opened. So they were bad Gretchen, not normal Gretchen, no wonder they ate orcs raw. The beast reported the news to his boss. Lin Yo was momentarily dazed after hearing it, then remembered the related lore of the Blood Knights. Due to constant torment from the Red Thirst, the Blood Knights had to frequently consume raw flesh and blood to curb their appetite and maintain rational thought. Their actions were deemed heretical by the Imperium of Man, and many inquisitors were tracking them. Out of necessity, the Blood Knights had to go to the surrounding areas of the expansion zone to make a living. Unexpectedly, he had just happened to encounter these vampires. If I remember correctly, the Blood Knights were supposed to be entirely sacrificed in the Battle of Baal, gaining valuable time and strategic space for Dante to await Guilliman's aid. If I eliminate these Gretchen now, will the Battle of Baal still be won? Lin Yo pondered for a few seconds, then suddenly thought of something. Open the galaxy map and bring up the coordinates of Baal, the Blood Angels' home world. A Gretchen responsible for helping Lin Yo record research progress stopped what he was doing, opened the holographic device, and brought up the map. Baal was located in the central part of the northern Far East starfield. It was right in the center of the Imperium Nihilus. No matter which corner of the Imperium Nihilus one went to, the journey from Baal was the shortest. Assuming a future encirclement of the Eye of Terror, Baal would undoubtedly be one of the most strategically located bridgeheads. The star sectors and systems near Baal also met this requirement. Lin Yo calculated the time, there were still 3 months until Guilliman's awakening. Adding the time it would take for Guilliman to travel from Makridge to Baal, the Battle of Baal would conclude in about 7 months. He could just send a unit of Palu boys, disguised as Blood Knights, to Bale's vicinity to scout the terrain and find a suitable location to establish a bridgehead. It didn't matter if their identity was exposed by the Imperium, as long as the intelligence was obtained. Beast, I've found a group of Peru Academy researchers for you. You lead them to cultivate a batch of Blood Raven kids. Linyo explained his plan, and the beast nodded repeatedly. Blood Raven kids were indeed suitable for behind enemy lines reconnaissance. Time passed in researching mutagenic spores and preparing the Blood Knights warband. 3 Terra days later, the Blood Knights battleship was occupied by the Blood Raven kids. Linyo calculated the timing of the Battle of Bale, instructing them to investigate the situation around the Bale system before the battle concluded, and then to time their arrival with Guilliman's appearance to gather intelligence from the Imperium on Bale. The Blood Knights could now depart. Linyo shifted his attention to the experimental results. The practical combat data for mutagenic spores was excellent. 30% of the Eldar completed mutation within 3 Terra days, while the rest would gradually transform into polyboys within 10 Terra days. The spores that did not parasitize the Eldar were not wasted. They rooted and sprouted on the surface like normal paraspores, forming verdant mushrooms, giving birth to squigs, Gretchen, and polyboys. Linyo relayed the experimental data to Pakadu, also informing him of his arrangements for Bale and the Blood Knights. Pakadu showed admiration and praised. Sometimes I truly feel that if you didn't lack time to think about plans, you truly might not need my assistance. Your arrangement for Bale perfectly aligns with the plan we've devised. We also intend to build Bale into a bridgehead. Linyo raised an eyebrow, took the datapad to review the plan, and confirmed that Pakadu's words were true. This was truly a case of great minds thinking alike. Linyo quickly flipped through the plan Pakadu had written, and a scene automatically formed in his mind. The green orc tide would set off from the Cronus expanse in the Far East starfield, pushing westward on the galaxy map, infecting all worlds along the way, forming an encirclement of space marine homeworlds, forging worlds, craft worlds, and Necron dynasties. By cutting off the supply lines of the space marines and oil boys, and slowly wearing them down, they could be disarmed. Craft worlds were self-sustaining with complete ecosystems. Using a strong assault to break in, then spreading mutagenic spores, should be able to dismantle the Eldar's social system from within and convert them into military force. The Necron dynasties were the most troublesome. These tough nuts were unaffected by mutagenic spores, and their combat power was among the best, with almost no weaknesses. According to rumors, the skeletons also possessed a super weapon that could detonate a specific planet with just a finger. If they were pushed too far, they might actually commit to a mutual destruction. But what if their dynasty worlds were blown up before they could act? Linyo chuckled to himself. He and Pakadu's team had thought of the same thing again. The plan clearly stated. First, form an encirclement, then launch a devastating strike against the skeletons with lightning speed, ensuring a fatal blow. This was the overall strategy of the Green Orc Tide. Well done, Pakadu. Let's proceed with this plan, and also pull back the expansion plan for warp monocrystals. Yes, Pakadu bowed respectfully, preparing to leave. Linyo called him back. Wait, I want to ask you something. Do you think there's anything I absolutely must do during this time? Chapter 353 Entering the Eye of Terror. The dignified Lord of Peru actively asked his subordinates if there was anything he needed to do. This was absurd, but it truly happened, and there was a reason for it. Due to their extreme disrespect for biodiversity, Palu boys were essentially cut from the same mold. Loyal, disciplined, and brave in battle, they possessed strong subjective initiative while also strictly regulating their behavior. Palu boys assigned to combat missions were never afraid of battle, never violated military discipline, and always followed orders. Even if there were a few troublemakers, Along would quickly deal with them and send them back to the mushroom factory for remolding. Palu boys and Gretchen assigned to research tasks were full of enthusiasm, hardworking, and highly secretive, making them even more worry-free than ordinary Palu boys. Managerial Palu boys responsible for planning generally possessed the genes of ancient orcs and Malkador. The higher their rank, the more genetic fragments of these two they had, making them more rational, grounded, and loyal. In short, after perfectly crafting genetic templates for various industries through genetic means, the Peru Empire had seemingly become an autonomous vehicle. Linyo seriously suspected that if he were to find a chair and sit down, like Huang Pitsi, never getting up and completely ignoring matters, the Peru Empire would still run smoothly. The entire empire was bustling with activity, yet he himself was like a man with nothing to do, unable to find anything to occupy himself. This made Comrade Ainyo, who was born to toil, a bit unaccustomed. It was for this reason that he asked the aforementioned question. What absolutely had to be done by him? Pakadu pondered for a moment and said, according to the current plan, there are two things that are best for you to participate in personally. Which two? The first is to ascertain the situation outside the galaxy in the end times and find a large galaxy with ample resources and no tyranids. Linyo nodded, instantly understanding Pakadu's meaning. There was no webway outside the galaxy, and warp travel was not fast enough, making exploration of exogalactic systems too time-consuming. As an orc true god, he could ignore the barriers of time and space and forcibly descend upon an orc outside the galaxy. This reconnaissance speed was much faster than a scout ship. The cost, however, was immense, possibly requiring tens of millions of tons of monocrystals to complete a single reconnaissance mission. And the second thing? The second thing is to investigate the Eye of Terror. Pakadu tapped open several documents on a data pad and handed them to Lin Yo, explaining, as of now, the Para Empire has very limited understanding of the Eye of Terror in the three sub-universes. On one hand, the electromagnetic environment and psyker field signals within the Eye of Terror are extremely chaotic, severely impacting the Shan Shan clan's reconnaissance efforts. On the other hand, the composition of forces within the Eye of Terror is overly complex, with Gene Seed Primarchs and Chaos members whose strength rivals Primarchs emerging endlessly, making on-site investigation by the Bloodhand clan extremely difficult. Considering that we might launch a full-scale assault on the Eye of Terror within 5 years, I think it's necessary for us to understand the situation there beforehand. The Eye of Terror, Lin Yo nodded slightly, your suggestion is good. Conquering the Eye of Terror comes first, exploring exogalactic systems comes second. I'll go to the Eye of Terror in the end times to check the situation first. During this time, please take care of the Para Empire's affairs. Yes, Lin Yo returned to the Weird Boy shack, pulled out a chair, sat down, opened the system interface, and searched for orcs that met the criteria. End times, normal timeline, within the Eye of Terror, orcs not corrupted by chaos. These 4 conditions were necessary, followed by auxiliary conditions such as troop strength and ships. Searching for eligible simulation targets. Search complete. Search results, 1302. Hiss. In the vast Eye of Terror, there were only a little over 1,000 orcs not corrupted by chaos. It seemed the environmental harshness of that place might exceed his imagination. Lin Yo further added search conditions. From the search results, filter out orcs with complete bodies, no injuries, and capable of free movement. Search complete. Search results, 12. What's going on? So many disappeared at once. Lin Yo brought up these 12 search results and reviewed them one by one. Search result 1. Name, WarHammer. Description, WarHammer, a warlord, accidentally entered the Eye of Terror due to a warp storm, losing contact with his fleet. He is currently eking out a living on a dead planet that exists simultaneously in reality and the warp. Search result 2. Name, Laser Spear. Description, Laser Spear, a warlord, unfortunately landed on a rotten thing planet. After eliminating the rotten things pursuing him, Laser Spear and 5 of his subordinates remained. This group is currently seeking refuge. Search results 3 to 7. Name, Laser Spear's subordinates, Tech Boy, Boom Boy, and Mad Doctor. Either a death world or a rotten thing world. The Eye of Terror was truly as rumored, an absolute paradise for rotten things. Lin Yo opened his personal inventory, rummaged through it, and pulled out a can of unique paraspores. Ordinary paraspores were emerald green, with a chitinous membrane on the outermost layer that filtered toxic gases. Another purpose of this membrane was to lock in moisture and absorb nutrients. The can of spores before him was vastly different, its outermost layer was a pre-treated biological armor. During the growth and development of the spores, the biological armor would synchronously evolve and expand, providing comprehensive protection for the spores. A parapsyker field would appear within 10 minutes after the spores landed, keeping chaos corruption out. Spores with such strong vitality were naturally expensive, with one costing as much as 1,000 ordinary paraspores. It also had a very memorable name, Rotten Thing Bane Spores, specifically used for spawning troops on Rotten Thing worlds. Lin Yo checked his inventory and felt it wasn't enough. He went to Pal Academy, made a round, and took a large batch of Rotten Thing Bane Spores to replenish his stock. After making full preparations, he selected the Laser Spear option and began the simulation. The scene shifted, and bizarre red rocks appeared before his eyes. Further away, strange black mountains floated, like 5 fingers descending from the sky. Lin Yo looked left and right, the boys under Laser Spear were listless and sickly. After a careful recall, Lin Yo understood. This planet's atmosphere was toxic, containing a type of parasite that could attach to blood vessels, continuously absorbing the host's blood to grow. Laser Spear, the warlord, had a better physique and was not yet infected by the parasites, but his subordinates, being relatively weaker, had all fallen victim. Lin Yo thought for a moment, pulled out a bottle of potion from his inventory, used a gene collector to obtain a sample of the parasite, and placed it in the potion bottle. Shaking the bottle vigorously, the liquid churned, and the gene sample rapidly reacted chemically with the main component of the potion, changing the liquid's color from transparent to light green. Pop! Lin Yo uncorked the bottle, pulled over a tech boy, opened his mouth, and poured half the bottle in. The tech boy's complexion improved visibly. Whoa, boss, what kind of medicine is this? It's so cool. The tech boy was overjoyed. Seeing that the potion was effective, Lin Yo quickly prepared and distributed more in the same manner. In a short while, the boys shed their gloom and became lively again. Listen up, all of you. Lin Yo took out the kin containing rotten thing bane spores and stuffed it into the boy's arms. This is the rotten thing bane bestowed upon me by our orc true god, Brother Li. Quickly, scatter them on the ground. Hurry, don't dawdle. The boys, holding the cans, scattered, sprinkling the spores in the direction of the wind. Although rotten thing bane spores had thicker outer shells, they were still spores. A handful could pick up about 2 or 3,000, each weighing as little as a strand of hair, and could drift far with a gust of wind. Gradually, dark green mist spread across the desolate wilderness, adding a touch of green to the crimson land. Rumble. A strong gust of wind blew, and a muffled, thunderous sound came from the sky. Lin Yo looked up but saw no gathering dark clouds, nor did the air humidity significantly increase. So where was that muffled sound coming from? Rumble. After the spores were sown, Lin Yo had the boys spray super growth spirit with the wind, and another muffled sound came from the sky. This time, Lin Yo was mentally prepared. He locked onto the sound source the moment it appeared. He saw the 5 black fingers in the sky enlarge and stretch, descending as if a giant were opening a large hand to grasp the ground. What is that? The palm rapidly grew on his retina, and Lin Yo felt a strong sense of oppression. When the 5 fingers finally pierced through the lowest layer of clouds and revealed their true form before Lin Yo, a holy crap escaped his lips. Large numbers of Imperium of Man ships were twisted into a braid, forming towering pillars over 10 kilometers in diameter, descending from the sky. Watching the 5 colossal structures about to crash to the ground, Lin Yo prepared for impact. Suddenly, his vision became blurry and ethereal, and the 5 colossal structures faded and vanished in an instant. Lin Yo sensed the dimensional changes and the intensity of the warp energy, and he understood. The 5 colossal structures had been transferred into the warp. This was a characteristic of the Eye of Terror. One moment in reality, the next forced into the warp, chaotic, ever-changing, full of uncertainty. No wonder the Eye of Terror had become a forbidden zone for the Imperium of Man. Lin Yo composed himself and urged the boys to get to work. A few minutes later, the first batch of spores that landed grew plump fruiting bodies. The emerald green caps were encased in light brown biological armor, and the parapsychor field slowly unfolded, providing a strong sense of security. A few more minutes passed, and the biological armor first showed the outline of a Palu boy's body. Mushrooms that had grown over 2 meters tall exploded within the biological armor, making a cracking sound like a ripe watermelon, and a brand new Palu boy was born inside the biological armor. Blood Raven Kid, reporting to Dada. The Blood Raven Kid saluted, standing ramrod straight. Shiny boy, ready for action. The shiny boy, immersed in the amniotic fluid chamber of the biological armor, shouted out. Steel Brave boy, Tech boy, Scholar boy, Expedition boy, Pain boys, reporting to Dada. Good. Very spirited. The Palu boys lined up, with new members constantly arriving to join the queue. In less than half an hour, over 30,000 Palu boys had gathered on site, with every imaginable function. When it came to leading troops, Lin Yo admitted he wasn't as professional as Huang Pitzi. He had specially prepared a unique boy for this operation, personally planting and watering its spore. At this moment, this spore had developed into a person, having perfectly completed its mission. Let me introduce you all to Neos, the overall commander of this operation. Lin Yo pushed the Emperor boy, who strongly resembled Huang Pitzi, to the front. Golden power armor, sharp sword-like eyebrows, a cold expression, and indifferent eyes if one ignored his light green skin. Wasn't this just Huang Pitzi? The Emperor boy's gene purity was probably about 30% of the original Huang Pitzi's. Lin Yo had removed superfluous factors such as the immortal trait, the Emperor's psychic talent, and his love and obsession for humanity, retaining only the Emperor's ability to lead troops and his strategic thinking. In many ways, this should be a youthful, commander-type Emperor. His individual combat strength was probably only 1/3 of the original Emperor's, slightly stronger than A Long. After delegating command and taking out ample weapons and equipment from his personal inventory to give to the Emperor boy, Lin Yo instructed the Pain boys to inject gene glands into Laser Spear's subordinates, transforming them into Palu boys. After a flurry of activity, the snowballing Eye of Terror exploration team took shape. Lin Yo sent the Emperor boy to lead the others in exploring the planet and collecting environmental information, while he himself started a new simulation, developing a second exploration team in another corner of the Eye of Terror. This cycle repeated 3 times, and 3 exploration teams led by Emperor boys began their work. Lin Yo ended the simulation and returned to the Weird Boy shack. He refreshed the search results for simulation targets, waiting for new ones to appear, while also checking the Emperor boy's archived brief. Half an hour later, new unfortunate souls appeared. 2 clan leaders were sent into the Eye of Terror by a warp storm. Lin Yo possessed them and developed them into exploration teams. Later that day, the number of exploration teams reached 12. The exploration results of Emperor Boy No. 1 appeared in the archived brief at this time. Name, Emperor Boy No. 1. Brief: The Emperor Boy expanded the team size to 350,000 Palu boys and explored towards the pole along the planet's longitude. During the exploration, they used scrap materials to build aircraft, construct outposts, and build helipads. Approximately 1 hour ago, the local rotten things discovered this exploration team, and hostilities began. An enemy calling himself Dicolimus Filer Toga, a great unclean one, appeared and challenged the Emperor Boy to a duel in the name of revenge. The duel is currently underway. Please keep a timely eye on Emperor Boy No. 1's movements to prevent his accidental death. The great unclean one's name was long, and Lin Yo felt it was somewhat familiar. After a brief recollection, he recognized this Nurgle daemon. When he previously raided Luganath, Lin Yo had briefly fought this great unclean one. Since it was an old friend, he had to go and meet it, perhaps to pry out the exact location of Father Nurgle's garden from its mouth. Chapter 354, Cloning a Great Unclean One. On an unknown planet. The temporary outpost built by the No. 1 survey team was under fierce attack. The rotten thing somehow acquired several titans from the Imperium of Man and launched an assault on the outpost's weak points. These titans were old and dilapidated, their thrusters couldn't operate when firing, and they couldn't fire when moving, making their attack rhythm sluggish. Even so, without heavy weapons and strategic weapon support, the survey team was still unable to raise their heads under the barrage of giant bolter shells. In a rift about 3 kilometers from the outpost, the great unclean one Decolimus engaged in a fierce battle with the Emperor Boy. The narrow space of the rift restricted the Emperor Boy's movement. Psyker pulses filled with pathogens and parasites permeated the rift. The Emperor Boy leaped into the air, using the biological rocket thrusters on his ankles for a short glide, avoiding the corrupting Psyker bombardment. Before he could find his footing, barbed vines burst from the ground, sweeping towards him like a tide. At the same time, toxic clouds and mists descended from the sky, sealing off the Emperor Boy's escape routes. Ha ha ha. Para-orcs. Mark my words. You are the first para-commander to fall by my hand, but you will certainly not be the last. Decolimus laughed wildly, raising his staff and waving it left and right, as green rays struck the ground. Plague ghouls covered in festering sores erupted from the earth, responding to their master's call, charging towards the Emperor Boy like a pack of wolves smelling blood, utterly crazy. Last time you made me lose too miserably, this time I will repay you 100-fold. Die. Become my creation. Decolimus extended his staff, aiming a half-meter-thick Psyker beam at the Emperor Boy. Black insects and toxic mist encircled the beam, layer upon layer, like the particle acceleration tubes of gauze weapons. The Emperor Boy had only managed to hold on until now by relying on his Peru and Psyker field, and the incoming strike was enough to take his life. At the critical moment, Brother Li arrived. Lin Yo took control of the Emperor Boy's body, holding the sword with both hands and slashing horizontally, clearing his field of vision. He then locked his gaze on Decolimus and activated the brain freeze technique. A system message popped up, reminding Lin Yo that it would cost 1.3 million tons of monocrystalline to freeze Decolimus for 1 second. Lin Yo confirmed without hesitation. Decolimus froze, and the Nurgle demons surrounding Lin Yo all paused. In that instant, Lin Yo used vibration art to propel himself, combined with the Emperor Boy's physical burst power, and appeared before Decolimus like lightning. With a diagonal slash of his right hand, Decolimus's head separated from his body. His left hand stretched forward, fingers loosely cupped. The ugly head was struck by an air hammer, accurately falling into Lin Yo's hand. The brain freeze technique ended. Decolimus was decapitated, his headless body trembled slightly, and a triumphant voice came from his abdomen. The surrounding Nurgle demons swarmed over. Haha. Did you think I would fall for the same trick twice? I saw through your deception long ago. That head is yours to keep. Thump. Thump. The head in Lin Yo's hand pulsed violently, swelling more than threefold in the blink of an eye, and then exploded with a bang. Bang. Foul, putrid matter splattered everywhere, and a shockwave mixed with Nurgle strains spread outwards. Sharp wind blades sliced the Emperor Boy into several pieces, and a thick layer of white maggots instantly appeared on the surface of the wounds. Several mutilated corpses fell to the ground, and the surrounding Nurgle demons swarmed forward, devouring them. Decolimus smiled smugly, kicking away a subordinate blocking his path, and approached. Just as he was about to desecrate the corpse, he suddenly saw something appear in the other party's right hand. Drip, drip, drip. The crisp countdown sound reached his ears, and Decolimus's expression changed dramatically as he recognized the object's origin. Protect me. Hurry. Decolimus turned and ran frantically. After taking 3 steps, the explosion arrived as promised. Boom. This explosion was more scientifically accurate than the previous one. A bright blue plasma storm expanded spherically, engulfing an area of 100 meters in less than 1 millisecond. Decalimus's figure was enveloped by the blue storm, instantly undergoing violent changes like cold water dripping into hot oil. Skin ripped, foul blood flew, eyeballs burst, and the veins on his body exploded inch by inch. Though incredibly difficult, Decalimus, by the Father Nurgle's blessing, survived the baptism of the plasma sparks. His subordinates were not so lucky. The blue storm swept across the entire area with devastating force, leaving a large expanse of charred wreckage on the ground. The vacuum created by the shockwave drew in a fierce wind, black smoke carrying sparks drifted with the breeze, and the remaining embers crackled. Decalimus gasped for breath, barely standing upright by leaning on his staff. Damn para-orcs, you're all lunatics. Even more insane than red-skinned demons. Decalimus cursed viciously, then felt a sudden tug in his abdomen, as if something was being pulled from his body by an external force. No. My head. His vision blurred, vaguely seeing his intestines, muscles, blood vessels, and skeleton flash past his eyes. The charred rift came into view, and Decalimus came face to face with the distinctive emerald green eyes of a para-orc. Before he could speak, the familiar sensation of stiffness arose. Damn. Caught, again. Decalimus's brain crashed. When he regained consciousness, he despairingly saw artificial amniotic fluid bubbles floating past his eyes. Again. He had been beheaded again and stuffed into an amniotic fluid tank as a prisoner. This was an absolute disgrace. Decalimus was enraged, yelling at the top of his lungs. What's the use of capturing me? As long as the Father Nurgle watches over me, I will never truly die. The tall orc in front of the amniotic fluid tank remained silent, merely staring at the great unclean one. Decalimus was puzzled, scanning his surroundings, and was surprised to find that this situation was different from the last time. The last time he became a prisoner, oh no, the last time he was captured by the despicable greenskins, there were many tech boy and pain boys busy around. But this time, in the vast interrogation room, there was only the orc in front of him, and no other person. What trick are you playing now? Decalimus scrutinized the other party warily. The orc remained silent, his eyes fixed on the great unclean one without a ripple of emotion. Contemplating? Playing mind games? Or just spacing out? Decalimus's eyes darted around, assessing the current situation. If you've changed your mind, you can let me go. I promise next time I'll give you a heads up before causing trouble. Decalimus tentatively tried to communicate but received no response. His words vanished as if falling into a bottomless abyss. Damn it, did the para-orcs send an idiot to watch me? Decalimus cursed in a low voice, they really underestimate me. When I get out, I'm going to chop all of you into pieces and fertilize the ground. Hiss whoosh. The orc suddenly took a deep breath, snapping back to attention, his eyes focusing. Decalimus looked over at the sound, just in time to see the corner of the other party's mouth curl into a repulsive arc. Greenskin, what are you doing? The orc grinned, raising a hand and snapping his fingers. A group of tech boy and pain boys entered from outside the door, carrying various instruments, followed by several Gretchen dressed as researchers, looking somewhat comical. Finally, was today's torture session about to begin? Decalimus secretly planned his lies, intending to endure this painful time without betraying the Father Nurgle. Oh, great Father Nurgle! Please witness my steadfastness and fearlessness in resisting torture. No matter how cruel their methods, I will not betray you. Decalimus mentally prepared himself, glaring at the orc in front of him. Come on. Ask whatever you want. If I say one more word, I'll turn my own skull into a showerhead. Strangely, the orc did not interrogate Decalimus. After entering the interrogation room, they busied themselves with their work, barely looking at the ugly head in the amniotic fluid tank. Even when they did, their gaze was disdainful and cold, as if they were looking at a clueless idiot. Decalimus felt uneasy. A few minutes later, a Gretchen in a white lab coat approached the orc, respectfully handing over a data pad. Boss, here's the experiment proposal you requested. The orc took it and examined it carefully. Decalimus pondered for a moment, then asked. Are you Lenio, the one who merged with the orc true god essence? The orc remained silent. Decalimus's eyes darted around, thinking of something, and said slyly. To be honest, we have spies in the Imperium of Man. We know the Imperium of Man and the Eldar's plan. Aren't they trying to transfer a part of the High Lord's power to the Rebellion-era sub-universe to cause you trouble? The orc glanced at the amniotic fluid tank. Decalimus chuckled. Don't worry, as long as you cooperate with us, the Imperium of Man and the Eldar's plan will not succeed. We can leave you a star sector in the dark side of the galaxy as your territory. Decalimus's words were interrupted. The orc handed the data pad to the Gretchen and instructed. The experiment proposal is fine, proceed with it. Yes, boss. The Gretchen glanced disdainfully at Decalimus, then turned and began operating the instrument. Buzz. Static noise emanated from the base of the amniotic fluid tank. A tingling electrical sensation instantly covered Decalimus's head, rendering him speechless. Several mechanical arms extended from the top cover, using laser cutters and mechanical claws to collect samples. The samples were placed in test tubes, which moved along a conveyor belt into a device with a holographic projection. A unique genetic structure appeared in the holographic display, a microscopic view of a triple helix gene fragment. 2 of the genes were similar to human genes, with approximately 20% genetic purity. The third gene was very strange. It was composed of a large number of genetic codes from non-human life forms, including but not limited to plants, animals, fungi, viruses, and aliens. This gene was Nurgle's masterpiece. It contaminated Decalimus's original human genes, reshaped his appearance and internal structure, and used hormones and other means to alter Decalimus's thought patterns and behaviors. Theoretically, this gene sample could be used to clone a Decalimus. Sizzle. The airtight hatch of the cloning chamber slowly opened, revealing the sleeping clone within the doorway, as ugly and foul-smelling as the head in the amniotic fluid tank. The boys collected gene samples from the clone and compared them with the mother's sample. The differences between the two were small, with a gene purity difference of only 3%, which was within the acceptable range of experimental error. However, this was only a physical difference. In terms of psyche, the two were vastly different. Decalimus could cast Nurgle spells, but the clone could not. This meant that the clone could not enter Nurgle's garden. The clone needed to be endowed with psyche similar to the mother. Because it involved deciphering the principles of Nurgle's magic, the subsequent experiment was very dangerous. A soul encoding reader, modified by PAL Academy, was brought in. It was about 5 meters high and 2 meters long and wide, resembling a rectangular stone pillar painted in red, purple, green, and black. Psyche lines extended from the reader, connecting to Decalimus's head. The device began to operate when the switch was pressed. Its holographic projection displayed Decalimus's soul encoding onto the open space. A Gretchen scholar beside him typed furiously on a keyboard, speaking rapidly. "Boss, there are a large number of soul keys with negative effects in Decalimus's soul encoding. I suspect Nurgle's magic is related to some soul keys. I recommend not deleting them directly, but rather using isolation technology to temporarily place them in a non-functioning soul sector, and then examining the effect of each soul key individually." The Gretchen responsible for soul encoding research was currently the most skilled in soul technology at PAL Academy. The orc nodded. "Do as you say, safety first." "Yes, boss. You can rest assured, I've dissected no less than 10,000 rotten things, and I know how to deal with the dirty things in their souls." Clatter, clatter. Inside the interrogation room, the sound of keyboards was incessant. Outside the interrogation room, the para-team stood ready, prepared for any sudden developments. 5 days passed in this manner. The Gretchen scholar let out a long breath, slumping into a chair, looking weak but with an excited joy in his eyes. Lienyo walked into the interrogation room. The Gretchen scholar scurried over, speaking feebly yet excitedly. "Boss, I did it. In 5 days, I deciphered the soul encoding of 15 Nurgle spells and found a spell command that can open Nurgle's garden. Please look here." The Gretchen scholar led the orc to the holographic display, meticulously explaining the function and principle of the three-dimensional spell model, and finally said. "After implanting this segment of soul encoding into the clone, I have 90% confidence that the clone will learn the Nurgle spell to teleport to Nurgle's garden." 90% confidence was not low. "You've done very well." Lienyo took out a can of spores and handed it to the Gretchen scholar. "Insert this into the clone's body. Once the clone enters Nurgle's garden, trigger the can's detonator immediately to scatter the spores." "Yes, boss." The Gretchen scholar accepted the can without question and walked towards the clone. A moment later, the can's implantation was complete. Lienyo sent the clone to the reality of the end times. Lienyo dropped it onto a desolate planet, withdrawing all para-orcs from its vicinity. The clone slowly awoke, looking bewildered. After about half a minute, it seemed to understand the situation, eagerly activating its psyche to communicate with the Father Nurgle's garden, and its figure transformed into a green flash, entering the warp. Chapter 355 Self-Destruction. Did the spore tank enter Nurgle garden with the clone? "Yes, boss, the tank went in too." "That's good." Lienyo breathed a sigh of relief, while Pakito beside him looked delighted. The Gretchen typed on the keyboard, head bowed, and said. "Boss, after the tank entered Nurgle garden, our tracker failed. We couldn't pinpoint the tank's exact location, nor are we sure if the tank's detonator is working properly." "It's all right, I have a way to verify the detonator's effectiveness." Lienyo gestured to Pakito. "I'll leave the command here to you. I'm going to meditate first." "Yes, boss." Pakito nodded in response. Lienyo left the monitoring room and entered the meditation room next door, opening the system simulation interface. The cracking of Decarimus's clone and Nurgle's spells was closely related to the plan to conquer the Eye of Terror. The spore tank implanted in the clone was one of the key links to the success or failure of the plan. The spores were specially modified. They lacked biological armor and had poor adaptability to harsh environments, but they possessed a set of adaptive optical camouflage films that could change with the environment. In the most ideal scenario, after the detonator exploded, the spores would spray out and merge with the surrounding environment, delaying their discovery by Nurgle for as long as possible. It was during this time that Lienyo would possess the orcs grown from the spores, personally visit Nurgle Garden, and use warp positioning methods to obtain the exact location of Nurgle Garden. Searching for eligible simulation targets. Search complete. Search results, 0 items. Lienyo was not discouraged and searched again. Search complete. Search results, 12 items. Very good, the first batch of spores developed successfully. Search complete. Search results, 28 items. The second batch of spores grew smoothly. Search complete. Search results, 175 items. The third batch of spores successfully bred Palu boys. Search complete. Search results, 1,871 items. Now is the time. The Palu boys born from the fourth batch of spores were the ones capable of completing the mission. The previous 3 batches of Palu boys could only be used to confuse potential enemies. Lienyo selected a Palu boy and began the simulation. His vision instantly switched, the scene before his eyes was replaced by dense vegetation and twisted vines, and the depressions on the ground accumulated foul-smelling dirty water resembling thick phlegm. Fighting sounds came from not far away. That was Nurgle demons in the forest encountering the first 3 batches of Palu boys, and both sides were engaging in combat. Lienyo knew time was limited and didn't bother to explore the forest deeply, directly finding a suitable rock corner for hiding. He opened his portable inventory and took out the warp locator, the latest research from PAL Academy. The core component of this device was a cylinder with multifaceted lenses, and below the cylinder were metal structures resembling spider legs. He inserted the spider legs into the ground, fixed the cylinder, pressed the button, and a circle of light green light waves spread outwards, then converged inwards, returning to the cylinder, followed by the second, third, and fourth circles of light waves. Each time the light wave returned to the cylinder, a piece of dimensional information would appear on the locator's data panel. Eternal Ring. 7th segment. 7th section. Pus Lake Corridor. The source of alveolar proliferation. Rustle. The nearby bushes rustled, and several 3-meter-tall Nurgle demons leaped out, approaching the rock where Lienyo was located. Lienyo looked back, resisting the urge to use brain freeze technique to freeze them, and continued to record the dimensional information on the locator. After the 8th round of light waves returned to the cylinder, the positioning work ended. Lienyo took out a plasma grenade and detonated it. Sizzle, bang. The plasma storm tore through his body, burning the fragile locator into slag. Several Nurgle demons pounced in vain, then unwillingly walked to the other side, chasing other greenskins. Lienyo's consciousness returned to his weird boy body. He got up and went out, arriving at the monitoring room. I've got the address of Nurgle Garden. Withdraw the parafleet monitoring the clone's planet and erase our traces. Yes, boss. Pachyder relayed the order, then followed Lienyo out of the monitoring room to another room. There were many shiny boys here. They surrounded the warp observation device in the center of the room, forming 3 circles, and were connected to the device via Chinook conduits. Lienyo entered the address of Nurgle Garden into the warp observation device. The shiny boys uniformly closed their eyes and began to observe the warp. A holographic screen appeared above the observation device, displaying the warp sites seen by each shiny boy in the form of hundreds of small windows. The warp was vast and boundless, even with an address guide. Searching for Nurgle Garden was not easy. In a blink of an eye, a month passed. The greenskin tide was steadily advancing in the Coronis expanse. 16 rotten worlds and 5 xeno worlds had already been occupied by Palu boys. These 21 worlds were all located within the same subsector of the expanse. The Parawebway project was implemented there. 15 Parastar beacons, over 100 monocrystalline cabins, and 30 stable reality and warp entry/exit points together formed the first Parawebway cluster, with a daily average flow of 50 million people and a cargo volume exceeding 10 million tons per day. Such vigorous and stable webway transportation was inseparable from the support of Paraground warp energy compressors. In the core area of the Parawebway cluster, covered by PAL Shadow, tens of thousands of 1000 T-class warp energy compressors operated 24 hours a day. Each machine had a daily output of 1000 tons of monocrystalline, meaning 10,000 machines produced 10 million tons per day, instantly increasing the Para Empire's monocrystalline production capacity by 20 times. How terrifying! This large-scale warp extraction behavior attracted the attention of the rotten things. On the periphery of the Parawebway cluster, red, blue, green, purple, and various other colored rotten things wandered around but could not approach the Parawebway. The light green glow emitted by the Parastar beacons had the effect of repelling the rotten things. Wherever the light shone, the rotten things avoided it. When the rotten things overcame their psychic aversion, they organized forces and launched a raid. The light of the Paristar beacons instantly transformed into pale shadow, enveloping the invading rotten things, cutting off their connection with the warp, and then activating the turrets of the monocrystalline cabins and star beacons to bombard and destroy them. Rotten things that died within the range of pale shadow were equivalent to being forcibly banished, unable to regenerate for a long time in the future. Facts proved that the combination of Parawebwe plus pale shadow had almost no opponents in the warp. The factors currently limiting the expansion of the Parawebwe cluster were no longer the production of monocrystalline, but the growth and reproduction of the Shan Shan clan. To maximize the utilization of Shiny Boys, Lianyo initiated gene simulation to iterate and upgrade the Shiny Boys gene template. After multiple verifications, screenings, and optimizations, the current Shiny Boys had completed 6 iterations. The size of the PAL shadow that a single Shiny Boy could condense increased threefold, and the duration reached over 10,000 hours, basically meeting the needs for building the Parawebwe. Here, we must mention the life of the Shiny Boys. From birth, they were soaked in amniotic fluid tanks. The amniotic fluid tanks were their homes and also their coffins. It took about half an hour for a Shiny Boy to develop from a spore into a head in an amniotic fluid tank. For the next approximately 10,000 hours, they would be fixed to the base of the amniotic fluid tank, continuously and stably maintaining the PAL shadow. After 10,000 hours, no matter how much lifespan these Shiny Boys still had, their amniotic fluid tanks would be connected to mechanical arms and mechanical legs, making it convenient for them to retire on Para home. After about 1,000 more hours, the retired Shiny Boys would become brain dead due to prolonged interference from the warp. Their amniotic fluid tanks would be recycled to cultivate new Shiny Boys. At first glance, working continuously for 10,000 hours seems utterly inhumane. But in fact, for the Shiny Boys, these 10,000 hours were like living in paradise. Maintaining PAL shadow required the consumption of universal Shinic material. Taking a puff of universal Shinic material felt good for a while. Continuously puffing felt continuously good, and there was no need to worry about one's head exploding from absorbing too much Shinic material. How could such a wonderful thing be criticized by the boss? So, when observing the living and working conditions of para-orcs, never judge them with the mindset of a shrimp. Others might think they are miserable, but in reality, they are having the time of their lives. Back to the main topic. After a month of high-intensity searching, the Shiny Boys finally found Nurgle Garden deep within the warp. Just as the Parawebwe cluster was protected by PAL shadow, Nurgle Garden was enveloped by a layer of Nurgle's foul miasma. Some Shiny Boys accidentally touched the miasma and immediately exploded into a messy pulp within their amniotic fluid tanks, with large numbers of white maggots and poisonous insects crawling in and out of the remains. The Palu Boys promptly used anti-Shinic medium for disinfection, thus preventing a Nurgle plague outbreak. How to break through Nurgle's foul miasma became the key to attacking Nurgle Garden. Additionally, whether the troop source was sufficient was also a problem. Boss, I've calculated that if the existing Parawebwe cluster is expanded twofold, we should be able to use a human wave tactic to capture Nurgle Garden. But whether we can kill Nurgle is still uncertain. Pakadu pondered and said. The biggest uncertainty is Nurgle's peculiarity as one of the Chaos Gods. He can have an almost infinite number of avatars across infinite space and time. It's very difficult for us to pinpoint his true body, and even if we do, and successfully eliminate him, he might resurrect in another avatar. Before we find a way to prevent his resurrection, we'd best exercise restraint, lest we reveal our trump cards. Lianyo should be the most knowledgeable existence in the Para Empire regarding the methods of true gods. Taking himself as an example, as of now, only stasis field had a slight effect on Wadaic simulation. Nurgle had been a chaos god for many years, the impact of stasis field on him would probably be minimal. Lianyo pondered for a long time, an idea forming in his mind. Pakadu, call Pad over. Yes, boss. A few minutes later, Pad arrived at the scene. Lianyo led the two into the shed, closed the door, and said. To eliminate the Chaos Gods, I've decided to make some sacrifices. From today on, you two will use me as a test subject to find a way to restrict true gods from transferring between avatars. A method to restrict true gods from transferring between avatars was equivalent to a god-slaying technique. Lianyo's words were like a bombshell, and Pad and Pakadol looked horrified. Boss, perhaps we should start with the Great Unclean One. Pad wanted to persuade him. Lianyo raised his hand to stop him. Just the Great Unclean One, we won't research anything. I know that very well. Rotten things of the Great Unclean One level, just freezing technology can limit their ability to transfer consciousness. But this technology won't work on true god level existences. You two don't need to persuade me anymore. Go assemble the experimental team and start the research as soon as possible. Pad and Pakadu exchanged glances, in their eyes, besides shock, there was only reverence. Yes, boss, we'll go prepare now. I will strictly control the personnel to ensure the information doesn't leak out. Pad bowed respectfully, turned, and left. Pakadu still wanted to say something, but finally also bowed and walked out of the shed. Later that day, a top-secret laboratory appeared in Para back garden. The experimental subject was a Palu boy specially prepared for the experiment, possessing all gene fragments, including those of ancient orc boss and weird boy. Lin Yo possessed him and cooperated with Pad in the research. Molecular knives, nanolocks, magnetic lassos, sonic anesthetics, anti-sonic barriers, stasis field, gene-cleaving rays. Various tools with restraining effects were used in rotation. The experiment lasted half a month. Lin Yo possessed the experimental subject and cooperated with the research for half a month, but all physical and genic methods ended in failure. Only one method had not yet been tried, and that was soul technology. This required examining Lin Yo's soul encoding, finding the secret of free consciousness transfer within it, and then performing targeted decryption. At this point, Pad refused to continue, no matter how much Lin Yo pressured him. Lin Yo did not force him. He cleared everyone out of the laboratory and personally examined his own soul using a soul encoding reader. Soul keys of various sizes flickered on the holographic display, and memories flowed through the gaps between the keys, some from after the transmigration, and some from before. These things were categorized in the conscious mind partition. Next to it was the deep conscious mind partition, which was filled with soul keys representing instinctual reactions, dreams, fantasies, and other thought activities. On the other side of the deep conscious mind partition was the systems partition, where the arrangement of soul keys became regular and scientific, overall resembling the system interface somewhat. Another layer of the system partition was the blank partition, where soul keys could be typed in using soul technology to create new thought settings for oneself, such as generating a personality out of thin air. Eliminating the soul could prevent a true god from transferring. But if you don't prevent a true god from transferring, how do you eliminate his soul? This was a paradox. Lin Yo was a bit troubled, unable to find any clues from his own soul. While thinking, he casually opened the soul templates stored in the soul encoding reader and looked at them one by one. The soul of a Palu boy, the soul of a shrimp, the soul of a Gretchen, the soul of a rotten thing. The soul templates flashed past like a revolving lantern. As a unique soul template entered his vision, Lin Yo involuntarily paused. On the holographic display, there was a blank space. Chapter 356 Nurgle's Bait. A blank soul template? The bright white holographic screen illuminated Lin Yo's astonished face. It was his first time seeing such a clean soul template. Was the template imported incorrectly, or was this template inherently blank? Lin Yo clicked on the template's basic information to view the details. Oh, so it's a Silent Sister's soul template. The template's basic information read. In the third year of the Para Empire, I extracted a soul template from a Silent Sister in the Rebellion-era sub-universe. By Li Ji, no one would have thought this template would be blank. I suspect that Silent Sisters are definitely unique existences, their thought patterns, personality traits, body habits, and other settings are not determined by their souls but originate from the neural signals and hormones in their physical bodies. This is truly amazing. It's hard to imagine that there are creatures in this world that can possess personality, emotions, habits, and other settings merely through physical chemical reactions. PAL Academy, Soul Technology Researcher, Silver Coin. Praise Li Ji. After Lin Yo replaced the Emperor of the Rebellion-era sub-universe, the Custodian Guard and Silent Sisters in the Terra Palace were all given paragene fragments. Incidentally, PAL Academy conducted some research on their soul templates. Presumably, this Silent Sisters gene template was imported into a soul encoding reader during the research process. After being implanted with paragene fragments, the Silent Sisters' special abilities were retained and not lost due to the gene editing surgery. The reason for this is simple. During the gene editing surgery, the Gretchen scholars deliberately preserved the Silent Sisters' original gene template, merely adopting an expansion method to add the paragenes. When the number of paragene encodings reaches over 30% of the combined paragene and Silent Sister gene encoding count, the Silent Sisters' paragene purity will simultaneously reach 30%, and Lin Yo will be able to possess the Silent Sister. Lin Yo originally thought that the Silent Sisters' special abilities were related to their souls, but now he realized he was completely wrong. The Silent Sisters' abilities are entirely gene-based. So, the question arises. Assuming a Silent Sister merges with the warp essence and becomes a first-class soul, could she then deploy avatars in different eras and transfer between them? Lin Yo looked at the bright white holographic screen, took a deep breath, and vaguely felt as if he had touched upon some crucial factor. He stood up, walked out of the laboratory, and called for Pad. Bring me the research report on the Silent Sisters. Yes, Dada. Pad walked away and returned holding a stack of crystals and data slates. Soul encoding is special and cannot be stored using conventional media, only the Eldar's spirit stones can store it long-term. Lin Yo brought the crystals and data slates into the laboratory and read through the contents alone. A few hours later, his eyes were filled with joy, seemingly having made a major discovery. Pad. Dada, did you call me? Pad pushed the door open and entered. Lin Yo was hunched over, reading, and said without looking up. I'll speak, you write. 1 clone sample of Silent Sister number 19, 1 clone sample of Silent Sister number 22, 1 clone sample of Silent Sister number 35, 3 fully developed Almighty Kids, 15 live rotten things any type, and finally, 9 live Nurgles rotten things. Got it? Yes, Dada. Go bring them over. Start with the number 19 clone and the 3 Almighty Kids. Yes, Dada. Pad left. Linyo waited a moment in the laboratory. A cryogenic tank was brought into the room and placed in front of Linyo, with 3 unconscious Almighty Kids beside it. The object sealed in the cryogenic tank was the Silent Sister number 19 clone. The clone numbers ranged from 1 to 35, with higher numbers indicating greater combat power and status of the original subject. Linyo stood facing the clone and the Almighty Kids, ensuring all 4 were within his sight. Gene simulation activated. Previously, when the Gretchen scholars peruified the Silent Sisters, they only used the method of expanding gene samples. This time, Linyo prepared to embed the gene fragments corresponding to the Silent Sisters' special abilities into the Almighty Kids' gene samples. He stood still for about half an hour, and gene simulation was successful. The 4 experimental subjects turned into streams of light that converged in Linyo's hand, erupting in a strong flash amidst a psychic fluctuation, then the light slowly dissipated, leaving a sesame-sized gene gland quietly resting in his palm. Linyo picked up a gland injection gun, loaded the gene gland into the barrel, aimed the muzzle at his left chest, and pulled the trigger. Pfft! Gurgle. Sterile gas pushed the needle, piercing Linyo's chest, and nutrient solution propelled the gene gland through the needle, stopping a few centimeters from his heart. Linyo looked down at his body, activated gene simulation, and accelerated the growth and development of the gene gland. 3 minutes later, gene simulation ended and entered the settlement phase. Alpha-grade psychic fluctuations spread outwards, and his body rippled like cream in a shift of light and shadow, then quickly gathered back together, forming a new humanoid creature. His skin was still green, and his skeletal and limb dimensions were roughly the same as before, with only minor feminized features appearing in a few individual areas, which were harmless. Linyo placed the electrodes of the psychic conduit on his head to read his soul encoding. A holographic screen popped up, and the soul template was completely blank. Very good, gene modification is complete. My soul template has been erased, my current thought activity is entirely due to neural signals. Linyo tried to open the system interface. A shocking scene appeared. The system did not respond. Not at all. No matter how Linyo called, no illusory interface appeared. Don't panic. This is normal. The soul template is blank, there is no soul encoding related to the system, so the system naturally won't appear. Correspondingly, special abilities such as gene simulation, WAX simulation, and the portable warehouse also fell silent at this moment. Linyo lost the ability to transfer consciousness, feeling both joy and fear. He suppressed the restless anxiety in his heart, picked up the gene gland injector, aimed it at his chest, and pressed the trigger again. Pfft! Gurgle. Cough cough. The gene gland was forcibly stripped, and intense pain invaded his mind. Linyo couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood foam. He threw the bloody gland and injector aside, took gene repair fluid, and injected it into his body. Pfft! Icy liquid spread from his neck to his limbs, and Linyo exhaled a comfortable breath. After waiting for half an hour, Linyo tried to silently say in his mind. System. Swish. The system interface popped up, and Linyo had never felt the system's prompt sound so beautiful. He once again possessed the ability to transfer consciousness among different orcs, and what brought about this change was merely repairing his own genes and removing the Silent Sisters' gene fragments. Facts proved that the soul is the bridge connecting an individual's life form to the warp essence. A blank soul means the individual's life form is cut off from the warp essence, unable to manifest the various strange abilities granted by the warp essence. If the soul is intact, then everything is fine. Whether the soul is blank or not can be adjusted using soul editing techniques, or by using the Silent Sisters' gene fragments for manipulation. Is editing Nurgle's soul difficult? No need to think about it, it's absolutely incredibly difficult. What about gene editing him? Is gene editing necessarily less difficult than editing a soul? At this thought, Linyo fell silent. Hiss. The laboratory door opened, and Pad entered with several other experimental samples. Linyo motioned for him to come and examine the recent research results. Pad's reading speed was very fast, and the changes in his facial expression were even faster, utterly astonished. Boss, this research result is truly astonishing. You've made immense sacrifices for it and taken unimaginable risks. Pad suppressed the turmoil in his heart, genuinely admiring his boss's actions. I did this purely to eliminate chaos and secure a more glorious future for the Para Empire. Linyo simply defined his actions and then said. Injecting the gene gland requires at least 5 days to take effect, and Nurgle won't wait patiently. My ability probably can't accelerate time for him. From your perspective, do you have any way to improve the speed of gene editing? Pad gazed at the experiment report in his hand, pondering as he spoke. Boss, I think we can approach this from 3 angles. The expression effect and expression speed of the gene gland are closely related to the expression vector. If we can find a more stable vector than the existing ones, then the expression speed can be increased using gene superpulse counting. Second, restrict Nurgle's mobility to buy time for the gene gland's expression process. Third, find a way to make Nurgle actively accept the gene gland. By the time he realizes something is wrong with the gland, it will already be too late. Pad's first idea reminded Linyo of the poison-resistant sealed yeast he had extracted from the Death Guard. The bad news was that the poison-resistant sealed yeast was permanently lost because Aelna forcibly deleted the mushroom farm-related functions from the system. The good news was that there should still be samples of poison-resistant sealed yeast in the gene laboratory beneath the Terra Palace in the Rebellion-era sub-universe, which the Emperor used to create the gene seed primarches. If worst comes to worst, finding a few Death Guard and obtaining yeast samples on-site wouldn't be impossible. Pad's second idea was very difficult. If Nurgle's mobility could be restricted, then gene editing and soul editing could be pursued simultaneously, and perhaps both editing methods could succeed, without being limited to gene editing. Pad's third idea, however, had many merits. Use a lure to entice Nurgle, making him actively consume the bait. The gene gland would be hidden inside the bait. As Nurgle digested the bait, the gene gland would modify his gene fragments, implanting the Silent Sisters genes. By the time Nurgle realized something was wrong, there would be 2 possibilities. Either Nurgle would reluctantly give up the bait and cut his losses decisively. Or, Nurgle would want both, trying to consume the bait while also preventing the gene gland's modification, and whether he could ultimately avoid having his connection to the warp essence severed by the Silent Sisters genes would depend entirely on luck. Pad, the gene expression vector can use the poison-resistant sealed yeast from the Death Guard. This might be found in Huang Pitzi's gene laboratory. Linyo paused. As for the bait to attract Nurgle, that's a bit troublesome. As a Chaos God, there are very few things Nurgle can't let go of, and we have even less access to them. I've thought about it carefully, and Sanguinius's warp essence might be the only bait we can access at this stage. Sanguinius? Boss, are you referring to the Shrimp Empire's Primarch? Exactly. I'm not entirely sure what Sanguinius's warp essence is, but I can confirm that all Chaos Gods desire to obtain it. We need to find an opportunity to make contact with Sanguinius. Linyo suddenly stopped, then slapped his hand. Damn it! Sanguinius of the Rebellion era is already dead. He broke into our second ascension point and was blown to smithereens by a supernova explosion. There's no Sanguinius in the Age of Apostasy or the End Times. This is troublesome. Reminded by his boss, Pad also recalled this matter. That supernova explosion back then was a stroke of genius, directly killing 4 Imperium of Man gene seed primarches and burying over 500,000 space marines. If they had known Sanguinius could potentially be bait to lure Nurgle, they should have made contact with him no matter what. Boss, I think Huang Pitzi's gene laboratory might contain Sanguinius's gene samples. We could create a clone and see if he can communicate with his warp essence. Pad suggested. Linyo thought about it and found no reason not to. Then go do it, but remember to look for the Death Guard seal yeast first. Yes, boss. Pad turned and walked away. Linyo used the Silent Sisters clone to perform gene simulation with the rotten thing samples. Half an hour later, the experimental results were out. The Silent Sisters gene fragments were also effective on the rotten things. It could turn the rotten things' souls blank, severing their connection to their main body and the Chaos Gods. After the experiment, Pad sent news that samples of poison-resistant sealed yeast had been found, but no samples of Sanguinius were discovered. Linyo performed new gene simulations while considering where else Sanguinius could be found. Activating the Cosmic Hall's electric meter reversal function to reset the Rebellion-era timeline, returning to the 3rd day after the Perfect City was destroyed. This was one method. But the cost might be very high. This kind of timeline reset would definitely affect Perohome in the webway, and Linyo himself might even return to the hive world, Epimedius, starting his rise from a small-time grunt in the lower nest. Therefore, Linyo did not intend to use electric meter reversal unless absolutely necessary. Are there any other ideas then? Linyo pondered for a long time, then suddenly remembered someone. When he helped Angren, the gene seed primarch of the World Eaters, seal his warp essence, the other party transformed from a burly man into a simple young boy. His name also changed from Angren to Ungra. Ungra claimed to owe Linyo a favor, as long as Linyo called him with his soul communicator, he would return to repay Linyo. Perhaps, Ungra might know where Sanguinius's warp essence is. Let me look, where did Ungra's soul communication code go? Chapter 357, Discovering Sanguinius. After a thorough search, Linyo finally found the note left by Ungra in the table drawer of the Weird Boy shack. He took out the encoder transmitter, dialed Ungra according to the information on the note, and left a text message. About 5 minutes later, the transmitter received a reply and began working, tapping out high Gothic with beeps and boops. Lin Yo glanced at it, then moved to the open space outside the shack, placed the transmitter down, and dialed Ingra again. After connecting, a holographic screen shot out from the transmitter, forming a life-sized image, and Ingra's figure appeared within it. His appearance hadn't changed much, he still looked like an 11 or 12-year-old boy, only his clothes had changed from burlap to a long robe with a priestly aura. "Are you working for the ecclesiarchy of the God Emperor now?" Lin Yo asked. "Yes, I usually play the role of a cardinal, operating openly as a mortal." "Oh, I see." It seemed the God Emperor was ready to face the people of the end times as a god. Ingra asked. "You came to find me, so you must need my help, right? Please, just say it. I said I would repay you, and I will definitely do it." Lin Yo thought for a moment, omitting his plan against Nurgle, and simply showed his interest in Sanguinius's warp essence. "It's like this, Ingra, I want to talk to Sanguinius, but I'm sure you know the situation. Sanguinius of the Rebellion era is dead, and there's no trace of him in the Age of Apostasy or the End Times. But I think, as a Primarch whose warp essence hasn't been devoured by the Chaos Gods, Sanguinius should appear elsewhere, and as one of the Primarches who embraced their warp essence, you might have a chance to contact him." "I understand what you mean. You might not yet know the relationship between the Primarches and the God Emperor. Let me explain it to you." "Please do." Lin Yo listened attentively. Gene Seed Primarches are essentially incarnations of human lesser gods without a second-grade soul. After we embrace our warp essence, we ascend to a first-grade soul. The God Emperor will call upon us. If we submit to him, we will become members of the ecclesiarchy, appear as mortals, and pledge allegiance to the God Emperor. But the problem is, not all Primarches are willing to embrace their warp essence, nor do all Primarches submit to the God Emperor after ascending to a first-grade soul. Ingra paused. Sanguinius falls into the former category. He is unwilling to embrace his warp essence and become a first-grade soul. He has the ability to resurrect, yet he is content to wander in the warp as a lone ghost, far away from the God Emperor's Astronomicon. Lin Yo asked. "Why is that? Did Sanguinius and the God Emperor have a falling out?" Ingra pondered for a moment. "To be honest, I don't know the specific situation, but based on my guess, it might be related to Sanguinius's warp essence, although I also don't know what characteristics his warp essence possesses." "Back to the main topic," Ingra said. "I know where you can find Sanguinius. During the Battle of Baal, at the critical moment of the Blood Angel's survival, Sanguinius secretly helped his children, buying them extremely valuable time until Guilliman's support arrived. Counting the time, there's still about half a month until the Battle of Baal, so if you want to see Sanguinius, you'll have to hurry." As Ingra spoke, he took a parchment scroll from beside him, wrote a few lines on it, and showed it to Lin Yo. "This is a letter of recommendation. When you see Sanguinius, give him this letter, and he should be willing to communicate with you out of respect for me." Lin Yo copied the text from the scroll. The two ended their communication. Ingra had fulfilled his promise, and Lin Yo learned of Sanguinius's whereabouts, making it a win-win exchange. Lin Yo returned to the shack, opened the system interface, and checked his archives. About 2 months ago, he had dispatched a fleet to explore Baal, and now it was time to activate it. Archive, Blood Raven Kid, Batarax. Briefing. Former Crimson Hand Warlord, Batarax, now commander of the Baal exploration team, arrived in a small star system near Baal today. He and his fleet have detected Tyranid wormhole signals all around Baal. This means that an unprecedentedly large Tyranid fleet is approaching the Baal system through wormhole channels opened by Manta. Judging by the strength and number of the wormhole signals, the number of Tyranid bioships should not be less than 10,000, with a swarm size of over 300 million creatures. According to Batarax's deduction, after the Tyranids arrive, the ecological environment of the Baal system and surrounding areas will severely deteriorate, permanently losing its development value. Lin Yo looked at the briefing thoughtfully, then raised his hand to activate the noisy box. "Pakadu, didn't we previously develop a device to eliminate wormhole signals and forcibly terminate wormhole jumps, based on the characteristics of Tyranid wormholes?" After a few seconds, Pakadu's response came. "Boss, yes, that's correct. About 2 years ago, you obtained samples of tendrils and Manta. After PAL Academy was established, the scholar team, following your instructions, conducted in-depth research on bioarmor and bioships. During this process, they deciphered the Manta's wormhole signals and created a ship-mounted device called the Wormhole Signal Eliminator. This device can emit gravitational waves in a targeted and frequency-specific manner, forcibly closing wormholes through cancellation, thereby terminating the Tyranid fleet's wormhole travel. Scholars predict that this forced termination of wormhole travel could cause immeasurable and devastating damage to the Tyranid fleet." Pakadu sent the research report to Lin Yo's datapad. After Lin Yo finished reading, an idea popped into his mind. Should he try to use the wormhole signal eliminator to stop the Tyranid fleet's wormhole travel? Doing so could minimize casualties in the Battle of Baal, essentially giving Sanguinius a great gift. With this gift and Ingra's letter of introduction, Sanguinius should meet him. Lienyo weighed his options and discussed them with Pad. Ultimately, he decided not to use the wormhole signal eliminator. The reason was obvious. Anyone would offer help in a time of need, everyone knows it's a huge favor. But the prerequisite for offering help is to let the snow fall first. If there's no snow, what's the point of offering charcoal? Therefore, the Tyranids must fiercely attack Baal. As for how to offer help, Lienyo thought for a moment and asked. How is the Green Tide project progressing? Boss, over 2/3 of the Cronus expansion zone has been paralyzed. Currently, the Green Tide is spreading towards the remaining part of the expansion zone and the areas west of it. It's expected to reach the vicinity of Baal within 6 months, at which point 1/5 of the Imperium's dark side will be paralyzed. The Green Tide would only reach Baal in half a year. This speed was already very fast, but relying on the Green Tide to deal with the Tyranids was simply too slow. How many parafleets can we deploy now? Lienyo asked again. Pakadu said. Report, boss. In the Rebellion-era sub-universe, there are 30,000 warships available for combat missions, plus 15 mushroom ships that can participate. In the Age of Apostasy sub-universe, our ship count is smaller, only 300, primarily used to guard the cosmic hall of the Age of Apostasy sub-universe. In the End Times, our ship count is even smaller, apart from ships converted from the Crimson Hand Warlord, there are only 50-odd warships in the Eye of Terror, and they are all simple guardsman-class ships. Lienyo pondered, planning the allocation of warships. What are those mushroom ships you just mentioned? Boss, those are special flagships built based on the Eldar's Infinite Circuit. Mushroom ship is a temporary name. Oh, I understand. Send me the detailed parameters of the mushroom ships. Understood, boss. Lienyo's datapad received a document. The document had a word count of 300,000, but fortunately, Pakadu had already highlighted the key points. The mushroom ship is 12 kilometers long, 8 kilometers wide, and 30 kilometers high. Its main facility is the Infinite Mushroom, integrated with the ship's keel. The Infinite Mushroom's function had no significant changes compared to the demonstration 2 months ago. It could work at high intensity for a month, cyclically resurrecting 300,000 Palu boys every 10 minutes. Within this month, as long as the number of Palu boys killed every 10 minutes did not exceed 300,000, there would be no reduction in forces on the front lines. If it exceeded 300,000 but was below 500,000, there wouldn't be a big problem either. Because the mushroom ship came with a Palu boy cultivation ecological module, which could quickly cultivate Palu boys according to war demands. The peak cultivation speed was 200,000 units every 10 minutes. If the number of casualties every 10 minutes exceeded 500,000, then Lienyo would need to arrange for special personnel to bring out the ultimate imperial weapon from Para home. Lienyo informed Pakadu that Sanguinius would appear in the Battle of Baal. The two discussed and came up with a plan with the highest success rate, as well as alternative plans to match it. Without further ado, Lienyo immediately began his actions, while Pakadu was responsible for mobilizing the fleet, ready to respond to his boss's call at any time. Lienyo possessed Batarax and found a dead planet about 10 light-years from Baal as a foothold. He consumed over 300 million tons of monocrystalline to open a portal, summoning 5 mushroom ships and 10,000 warships. The dead planet completed its parazation transformation within 10 Terra days, changing from its original drab appearance to a lush green, covered in para mushrooms. This planet became the Shiny Planet, with over 1.3 billion shiny boys on it. 5 Terra days later, the Battle of Baal began. The Para-Orcs did not immediately assist the Blood Angels. 10,000 warships were scattered throughout the Baal system, weaving and maneuvering on the fringes of the battlefield, not engaging the Tyranid biofleet directly, nor responding to the Blood Angels' communication requests. After about 5 Terra hours, a paraship detected an abnormal psychic signal in the warp. It was a small white dot hovering around the PAL shadow, appearing very fragile, yet always finding gaps in the PAL shadow to weave through, reaching the most intense areas of combat, providing warp assistance to the Blood Angels in reality. Its method of assistance was not to bestow power upon the Space Marines in reality, but to use some soothing method to help them overcome the negative effects of the Red Thirst and Black Rage. This small white dot was, with high probability, the ghost of Sanguinius. Boss, I barely caught up with the small white dot, it's about to discover me. Peng Pa closed his eyes tightly in the amniotic tank, trying to keep pace with the small white dot. In the holographic display, a translucent figure moved through the PAL shadow, agile and extremely fast. When the Blood Angels entered the Red Thirst and Black Rage states, warp energy would be disturbed, becoming stained with blood red and purplish black. The translucent figure touched these two colors to eliminate them, thereby allowing the Blood Angels in reality to regain calm at crucial moments. Lin Yo observed this process and was certain that this was Sanguinius, whom he was looking for. Send him a soul communication code, and remember to transmit Ngri's letter of introduction. Understood, boss. Peng Pa activated his psychic powers, sending a signal to the small white dot. The small white dot paused for half a second, responded, and then continued to move around the battlefield. Peng Pa printed out the information he received. The gist of it was: if you want to communicate with me, help the Blood Angels win this battle first. Lin Yo and Pakadu exchanged glances and nodded slightly. The latter understood, turned to the Emperor Boy on the command bridge, and said: the Para army will now intervene in this conflict. First, assist the Blood Angels in defeating the Tyranids, then proceed to the next step. Yes. The Emperor Boy accepted the order and, as the army commander, maneuvered the fleet to cut into the battlefield from the side. Peng Pa continued to monitor the changes in the warp. After some time, the Tyranids annihilated the Blood Angels' fleet and began their ground assault. At this point, Abaddon completed the feat of tearing the galaxy, and the Great Rift unfolded, splitting the galaxy in two. The Tyranid tendrils became disoriented due to the warp shock caused by the Great Rift, providing a perfect opportunity for the Blood Angels to counterattack. The Para-fleet cleared the Tyranid fleet from the skies above Baal, and the Blood Angels cleared the Tyranids from the ground. Just as the Blood Angels sent a communication request, wanting to understand the Orcs' origins, they discovered with horror that the Orc fleet had locked onto them with fire control radar. Not only that. When Gilliman's fleet appeared in the warp, Peng Pa immediately sent a warning to the Emperor Boy. I see Gilliman's fleet. They are expected to arrive at Baal within 3 Terra days. The Emperor Boy looked at Lin Yo, who nodded in affirmation. The Emperor Boy immediately ordered: deploy the Pal Shadow, and stop Gilliman and his fleet. The Peru on the Dead World deployed the Pal Shadow, completely enveloping the Baal system. The manifestation of the Pal Shadow was carefully planned, unlike the Tyranid Shadow, which was full of loopholes. Almost as soon as it formed, the small white dot, which had been weaving and maneuvering in the warp, was forced into a blank space specifically left by Lin Yo, unable to move an inch. Chapter 358, Capturing Sanguinius. Da, the shiny boy sent us a message. He wants to talk to you. The noise kid turned to Lin Yo on the command platform and asked. He said he wants to meet in the warp, not through holographic communication. Da, are you going to meet him? Lin Yo did not refuse and walked towards the viewport. Open the external hatch of the control tower. Pakadu, I'm leaving you in charge here while I'm gone. Yes, Da. Pakadu wasn't worried about his Dada's safety at all. The nearby warp was already covered by the Pal Shadow. If Sanguinius were to suddenly attack, he would only bring misfortune upon himself. The hatch opened, and Lin Yo entered the warp, flying towards the shiny boy not far away, with the Pal Shadow automatically making way for him. The distance between them shortened. The shiny boy gradually magnified in Lin Yo's vision. It was a figure with pristine white wings, tall and handsome, with a solemn expression. What is your role in the Para Empire? Sanguinius asked. Lin Yo responded in low Gothic. I am whoever you wish to see. Sanguinius maintained a stern face, scanning the green-skinned figure a dozen meters away. Are you the transcender who stole the Imperium of Man's warp essence? If you do not wish to be an enemy of the Imperium of Man, then step aside. Lin Yo looked at Sanguinius with indifferent eyes, picked up the roaring box from his waist, and spoke. Bombard Baal, conduct a landing extermination, eliminate at least 1/3 of the Blood Angels, and capture Dante alive. Yes, Da. The Para-fleet began carpet bombing with tactical nuclear bombs. Sanguinius's expression changed dramatically, his eyes shifting from aggressive to sinister. He roared and charged towards the green-skinned figure, his wings spread, emitting a burst of white light. Damn Transcender, stop what you are doing. All you will do is mess up the galaxy. Outsiders like you should obediently accept Father's arrangements and sacrifice yourselves for our Imperium of Man. What nauseating rhetoric. In the past, when he lacked ability, being controlled by others was acceptable. Now that the Para Empire was steadily rising, if the Imperium of Man still dared to look down on them, they were simply courting death. Lin Yo faced Sanguinius's attack without fear, standing tall and unmoving. Buzz buzz buzz. A white beam of light flashed brilliantly. Lin Yo raised the Pal Shadow. The dense green warp energy engulfed the white light beam, and Lin Yo within the shadow remained unharmed. Sanguinius charged close, just about to unleash his psyker field to dispel the Pal Shadow, when he suddenly felt a strong psyker field fluctuation beside him. Before he could dodge, the warp energy was bound by the psyker field, forming an indestructible cage that completely sealed him. Sanguinius was both shocked and enraged, shouting with crimson eyes. Don't force me, Transcender. I know you are after my warp essence. I warn you, if I detonate the warp essence, we will all die. You will never get it. Lin Yo looked coldly at Sanguinius, picked up the roaring box, and commanded. Annihilate the blood angels. Put Dante's specimen into an amniotic tank. I want to study it personally. Ah! Sanguinius raged, repeatedly punching inside the cage, stirring up dense ripples. Lin Yo lowered his head and glanced at the data pad. As expected of the Imperium of Man's Blood Angel's Primarch soul. Just those few punches had wiped out 1% of the population on the shiny planet. Keep up the good work, Sanguinius. Sanguinius raged in futility, while Lin Yo remained as calm as an ancient well. About half an hour later, a voice came from the roaring box. Da, the blood angels have been annihilated, and Dante has been placed in the amniotic tank. No. Sanguinius roared. Lin Yo ordered. Blow up Bale. All right, da. The Parafleet fired deep drilling bombs, sending warheads containing destructive power into the planet's core. Bang! With the earth-shattering explosion in the reality, a brief and bright fireworks display appeared in the warp. Sanguinius roared in despair. I will take you down with me. Lin Yo remained unmoved. A few seconds later, Sanguinius did not self-destruct. He stood in place with a conflicted expression, the scene somewhat awkward. Lin Yo chuckled. Sometimes, I sincerely think you gods of the Warhammer world are quite amusing. In other worlds, high-tier combatants can crush stars with their bare hands, reverse time, and create their own realms. But what other abilities do your world's high-tier combatants have, besides having numerous avatars across different timelines and cowering in the warp? Sanguinius was crestfallen, neither daring to self-destruct nor able to escape, he could only stand frozen with a difficult expression. A voice came from the roaring box. Da, Bale has been detonated. Very good. Prepare to seal Sanguinius. I only want his warp essence, not his personality. Yes, da. The warp cage became substantial, dragging Sanguinius towards the Parafleet. Dense pale shadow surrounded him, making escape impossible. Entering the spaceship, they returned to the reality. The shattered remains of Bale were a shocking sight. Sanguinius clenched his fists, consumed by rage, and roared. Die! Boom! Sanguinius detonated the warp essence. The Parafleet around Bale was completely devoured. The blood-red light of the warp essence fragmented into several pieces and shot out. As soon as they entered the warp, they were immediately sealed by the ubiquitous pale shadow. Another fleet flew over from the shiny planet. Lin Yo switched bodies, personally picked up Sanguinius's warp essence, and brought it back to the ship. The power of Sanguinius's self-detonation was directly proportional to the degree of self-destruction of the warp essence. He hoped that after the self-detonation, he could use the dispersed warp essence to be reborn elsewhere, and thus deliberately controlled the self-detonation's power. That explosion just now only covered an area of 0.002 light-years, which was nothing and caused extremely limited damage to the Para-Empire. After collecting the warp essence, Lin Yo prepared to lead the fleet back to the rebellion era to study it thoroughly. At this moment, the warp suddenly glowed with a golden light of command. Sharp golden rays pierced through the pale shadow, striking directly at Lin Yo's face. Lin Yo neither dodged nor avoided, blocking the dazzling and cold golden rays at the cost of 5% of the shiny planet's population. 2 seconds later, the golden light converged, forming a shimmering golden figure. It was the Emperor. Hand over Sanguinius's warp essence. It does not belong to you, nor are you worthy of possessing it. The Emperor stood between Lin Yo and the spaceship, his gaze piercing, the golden light in his palms flickering, ready to unleash a charged attack at any moment. Lin Yo picked up the roaring box and looked at Huang Pitzi with a half-smile. Do it. Buzz. The warp energy was controlled by the shiny boy, transforming into green mountains that surrounded the Emperor's avatar like Mount Tai pressing down. The Emperor's avatar extended both hands, swinging them left and right, striking the mountains with golden light beams, dispelling the green warp energy, and charging towards Lin Yo. Lin Yo took out a piece of Sanguinius's warp essence and squeezed it hard. Crack! The warp essence shattered, turning into specks of starlight that dissipated in the warp, with faint, almost inaudible wails drifting through the air. The Emperor's expression changed dramatically, his figure flashing, rapidly closing in. Lin Yo took out 2 more pieces of warp essence and crushed them forcefully. The Emperor's speed increased again and again. As fast as he was, Lin Yo's speed in crushing the warp essence was just as fast. By the time only 10 pieces of warp essence remained in Lin Yo's embrace, the Emperor forcefully slammed to a halt, angrily rebuking. Damn Transcender, I didn't expect you to be so despicable. Your Para-Empire is finished. From now on, even if you are in the dark side, you will still face the righteous judgment of the Imperium of Man. The Emperor's avatar transformed from solid to ethereal, and the golden light piercing the great rift and the pale shadow disappeared simultaneously. Lin Yo quietly let out a sigh of relief. The brief confrontation was actually not as simple as it appeared on the surface. Using Sanguinius's warp essence to force back Huang Pitzi was just one measure. Secondly, the shiny boy on the shiny planet had been providing him with protection all along. In that short period, the shiny planet's population had already dropped below 30%. If Huang Pitzi had persisted a little longer, his side would not have been able to hold on. Escape, escape. Lin Yo opened the teleportation gate and instructed before leaving. Set traps here to ambush Guillemon. Eliminate him as much as possible. Yes, da. Pakadu, reborn after death, had acquired memories from his previous life through a neural interface, so his memory was not fragmented, and he knew what had just happened. Lin Yo arrived at the Para back garden, where 5 pads awaited, each responsible for studying a portion of Sanguinius's warp essence. 5 research teams advanced simultaneously, each focusing on a different research direction. Team 1 researched methods for replicating the warp essence. Team 2 explored the principles of the warp essence from a physical perspective. Team 3 had a large number of shiny boys, who, under the guidance of the pad, would ascertain the psyker field characteristics and proper usage of the warp essence. Team 4 explored the connection between the warp essence and genes, and attempted to combine the warp essence with the Silent Sisters genes to create a gene gland highly enticing and deceptive to Nurgle. Team 5 focused on purification, seeking a method to transform Sanguinius's warp essence into a Palu boy's warp essence. Lin Yo initiated gene simulation, accelerating the progress of each research team at the cost of significant monocrystal consumption. 3 teradays later, over 600 million tons of monocrystals vanished, and 4 of the 5 teams successfully completed their research tasks. Team 1 discovered that Sanguinius's warp essence could be cultivated by infusing it with faith, achieving a certain degree of replication of the warp essence. Team 2, after conducting numerous physical experiments, concluded that the so-called warp essence was a fixed structure, stable energy field, and a collection of energy and consciousness with a certain degree of self-awareness. When infusing it with faith, it could be hypnotized by replacing keywords, thereby transforming it from Sanguinius's warp essence into Brother Li's warp essence. Team 3, at the cost of over 100,000 shiny boys, clarified the effects of the warp essence. Simply put, it could temporarily gain an explosive power far exceeding normal levels, provided it self-imposed limitations. For example, when Bloodthirst and Black Rage erupted, the Blood Angels' combat power surged. But if they could not self-limit and eliminate Bloodthirst and Black Rage, they would become lost and turn into monsters. This characteristic of needing to self-limit power for extraordinary bursts, thereby making the extraordinary bursts controllable, was the unique aspect of the Blood Angels' warp essence. For convenience of memory, Lin Yo named this characteristic Unstable Rampage Technique. Team 4 successfully integrated Sanguinius's warp essence into gene fragments, which then fused with the Silent Sisters gene fragments to form a gene gland. This approach sounded somewhat impractical, but it was entirely feasible in practice. Careful parascholars and pads discovered that after fragmentation, warp essences became more akin to the physical side, mainly manifested in how certain psyker field fungi could serve as containers for the warp essence. Team 4 used a general-purpose seal yeast to degrade the warp essence, obtaining approximately 1 kg of yeast mass containing the warp essence. This fungal mass, after gene editing, could then become a gene gland. Team 5 was the only team whose experiment failed. However, the reason for the failure could not be blamed on them, but rather that Sanguinius's warp essence was inherently incompatible with orcs, the two could never merge from the start. Therefore, gene seed primarchs like Parified Sanguinius or Parified Guillemon, who were transformed into Palu boys, could not appear in the Para Empire. Only individuals like Pat and Pakado could be parified through genetic means. Lin Yo instructed the 5 teams to collaborate on optimizing the gene gland, in preparation for capturing Nurgle. Pakado, seeing his Dada free, stepped forward and whispered. Dada, news from the fleet near Bale is that Guillemon did not go to Bale. He bypassed our trap and headed towards Ultramar. Our ambush plan was unsuccessful. This was expected. Guillemon was protected by the Emperor, how could the latter watch him die? It's all right. Move the fleet to the Eye of Terror to assist the exploration team in exploring the Eye of Terror, and be ready to cooperate with us in attacking the Nurgle Garden. Once the gene gland is ready, we will make our move. Yes, Dada, there are 2 more things you need to know. Pakadu said. First, the green-skinned Wadaik has already occupied the expansion zone and is spreading towards the Far East Starfield. It is expected to occupy 1/4 of the Far East Starfield within a month. Second, the modified mutagenic spores for webway demons have been completed. These spores possess all the properties of ordinary mutagenic spores and can also actively seek paths to spread the spores to our designated webway spaces. Lin Yo's eyes lit up, bring me the experimental report. Pakado handed over the data pad. After webway demons were transformed into Palu boys by mutagenic spores, the Parafleet would open webway gates for them, allowing them to spread autonomously. The green-skinned Wadaik. In the reality spread largely without order, Palu boys could go wherever they pleased. The green-skinned Wadaik in the webway could be guided by specific wavelength parapsyker fields, gathering in specific webway spaces. For example, the webway city beneath Huang Pitzi's toilet, Kalastar. Arrange it immediately. Launch the webway green-skinned Wadaik. Plan. Lin Yo paused. Target, Terra. Yes, da. Oh, and how are the arrangements for invading the Nurgle garden coming along? Everything is ready, just waiting for the gene gland. Very good. Chapter 359, Explosion. The Great Rift was a disaster for humanity, but from another perspective, it was also a feast for demons and Xenos. Nurgle Garden. Several gardeners strolled through the dense forest, slowly making their way towards the demon palace on the horizon. Rotigus, Father of Rain, walked at the front of the group. He was a bloated Nurgle demon whose body resembled a triangle, with a large mouth spanning his entire abdomen, and every step he took caused large amounts of pus to rustle down. Rotigus slightly turned his head, glanced at the figure at the end of the line, and let out a wet chuckle. Decimus, have you still not recovered your clone? A trusted confidant of Father Nurgle, yet his clone was detained by a few greenskins, how ridiculous. The group became lively. Yes, Decimus, do you need our help? I see some good snails in your garden, if you are willing to give me one, I think I'd consider helping you get your clone back. Haha, if you ask me, Decimus should learn humility and proactively seek our help. The mockery from the others made Decimus's expression fluctuate between anger and fear. My affairs don't need your interference. They're just a bunch of greenskins hiding in the webway, that's all. Once I gather my army and choose the right day, I guarantee I'll wipe them out completely. Save that for Father Nurgle, Rotigus coldly slanted his eyes at Decimus. The other day, an uninvited group came to Father Nurgle's garden. Guess how they got in? Whose teleportation spell did they use? Decimus was momentarily speechless, lowering his head. I'll get that clone back as soon as possible, or disband it. I promise, this won't cause any problems for Father Nurgle. Rotigus chuckled. Remember what you said, Decimus. That idiot Abaddon, he helped us open the feast in reality, so he's still somewhat useful. If because of your clone, we don't have enough fun, and Father Nurgle doesn't get satisfactory works, then you'd better be prepared to become fertilizer in the garden. Decimus broke out in a cold sweat, stammering a response, and said nothing more. The gardeners changed the subject, no longer paying attention to the unlucky Decimus. They loudly discussed the planets they had chosen in reality, comparing notes, exchanging planting techniques, and occasionally showing off new inventions, boasting proudly. About half an hour passed in this manner. The Demon Palace, far on the horizon, arrived before the gardeners with heavy steps. A vine-covered corridor extended from the Demon Palace's terrace, spreading towards the ground. The gardeners followed the corridor to the outer perimeter of the Demon Palace, and led by Nurgle, passed through a courtyard filled with poisonous flowers, venomous insects, pus pools, and thorny monster trees, arriving at Father Nurgle's reception room, the Rotting Court. Here, there were over a dozen bubbling cauldrons. Several roots entwined the cauldrons, and on these roots grew emaciated human figures, integrated with the roots, their expressions dazed and blank. They held stirring rods made of chicken bloodwood in their arms, mechanically stirring the thick liquid in the cauldrons. Occasionally, when they stopped, the insects within them would gnaw at their bodies, producing crisp crunching sounds. At such times, a fleeting expression of pain would appear on their faces, before they continued to numbly stir the cauldrons. As expected of Father Nurgle, even a simple work of art is full of irony. Rotigus came to the cauldron, carefully observing the human figures integrated with the tree roots, praising repeatedly. Father Nurgle is satirizing the oil boys' servo-automata craftsmanship. The oil boys weld living beings to assembly lines, remove their internal organs, strip their blood vessels, hollow out their brains, and turn them into machines that are merely human in form. Father Nurgle is using his creation to warn those oil boys that even without mechanical devices, relying solely on the power of nature, we can still transform humans into servo-automata. Oh no, they should be called tree automata. Praise Father Nurgle! Praise Father Nurgle! Everyone echoed, in perfect harmony. The tree automata looked up at the gardeners, then continued to numbly stir the cauldrons. After a brief wait, the rumbling sound of wheels approached from afar. Hundreds of hunched Nurgle demons appeared, dragging a luxurious flatbed cart. Seated on the cart was the ruler of this world, Father Nurgle. The gardeners bowed, touching the ground with their foreheads, their bloated bodies displaying astonishing flexibility. The flatbed cart stopped, and Nurgle's flabby flesh jiggled a few times. My children, I know you are eager to participate in the feast in reality. I don't intend to take up too much of your time. But before you leave, I hope you can answer one question for me. Nurgle sat on his throne, his fat overflowing from beneath the armrests. Tell me, what is the true meaning of life? Rotigus spoke first. Father Nurgle, the true meaning of life is reincarnation. We must embrace new life and tolerate decay. Well said, Rotigus, you are always so astute. However, that is not the answer I wish to hear today. Nurgle's dissatisfaction with the standardized answer indicated that today's question held a deeper meaning. Rotigas's heart trembled, and he no longer tried to show off, lowering his head. Another gardener, riding a snail, stepped forward and said, Father Nurgle, the true meaning of life is progress, just like my snails. They were weak and slow when they were born, but now they are as strong as a commander and as swift as lightning. Wrong, Nurgle uttered a single word indifferently. The gardener's expression stiffened, and he drove his snail backward. No one else dared to speak. Oh, my children, it seems I have been too strict in my usual discipline, to the point where you don't understand how to adapt. Nurgle shifted his buttocks, leaning forward, and the throne beneath him creaked. Let me tell you the answer. The true meaning of life lies in sowing. As the feast begins, the brutal devour, the wise manipulate from behind the scenes, and those consumed by lust endlessly indulge. And we are the sowers of life, the guardians of reincarnation, the eternal gardeners. Before the living beings of reality are torn apart by the brutal, before they are ambushed by the wise, before they are drowned in desire, we must teach them how to seek the true meaning of life. Nurgle paused. Do you understand, my children? For mortals, the true meaning of life is reincarnation. But for you, the true meaning of life is sowing. The gardeners all bowed their heads in unison. Yes, Father Nurgle. Your teachings are like a resounding bell, truly enlightening. Great Father Nurgle, every word of yours is profound truth. Nurgle let out a satisfied laugh. Very well, my children, drink the soup from the cauldrons, and then go sow life for me. I will open a door to reality for you, and the fungal liquid in the cauldrons will guide your way. The gardeners each chose a cauldron, lifted it, and drank it down in large gulps, not daring to leave even a trace of pus. The fungal liquid fermented within the gardeners, and the fermented products acted upon their bodies and souls through physical and psychic field means. Everyone, without prior agreement, received Father Nurgle's revelation. They sensed a certain planet in reality, which was the sowing ground Father Nurgle had carefully chosen for each of them. Go, my children, go spread the correct faith. Nurgle raised his staff, pointed it at the empty space, and shot out a green beam of light. A teleportation gate, over 10 meters high, opened. The gardeners, in their true forms, passed through this gate, heading to their designated sowing locations. Just then, the teleportation gate suddenly twisted and deformed, changing from a green oval portal into an orc face with a gaping mouth. The scene looked like a prank, but everyone present was shaken. The gardeners were stunned. It was their first time seeing someone capable of twisting Father Nurgle's psychic field spell. Nurgle was taken aback and lost in thought. He could clearly feel that the teleportation gate had slipped from his control, and someone had seized control of it. As everyone was in a daze, the teleportation gate, transformed into a large orc face, spoke. Wow, I succeeded. Waik. Ha ha ha. I succeeded. I'm the first one to accurately pinpoint the psychic field signal and hack in. I'm the coolest lad under Big Broly. Ha 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 ha. Big Broly? Could it be that transmigrator who recently became the orc true god? Is this orc in front of me Big Broly's subordinate? No. Nurgle's body trembled, his entire mass of flesh shaking uncontrollably. He suddenly thought of something terrible and abruptly turned to look at Decimus. You haven't recalled your clone yet? Answer me. Decimus. Look me in the eye and answer me. Have you recalled your clone? Father Nurgle, my clone. I. Decimus was so terrified he couldn't speak properly, backing away uncontrollably. Explanation is just concealment, and concealment cannot solve the problem. Within those few seconds, the teleportation gate, twisted into an orc head, exploded with a roar. The spatial turbulence caused by the dimensional tear made the gardeners sway, their pus and branches rustling. When the spatial turbulence dissipated, a horrifying scene appeared. Where the teleportation gate had been, there was now a spherical green light curtain. This light curtain continuously expanded and grew larger, rapidly devouring everything around it. The first to be swallowed were several tree automata and cauldrons. The tree automata turned to dust amidst wails, and the hard cauldrons only lasted half a second longer before being crushed by the green light curtain. Nurgle slammed his hand on the armrest, squeezed his body out of the chair, raised his staff, and shot a beam of light, striking the green light curtain. But to his surprise, his full power strike was like a stone sinking into the sea, having no effect whatsoever, and the green light curtain continued to expand. Damn it! This is the collective psychic field of those para-orcs. Quick, give me your power. I must mobilize all the power in the garden to suppress the para-orc's psychic field. Nurgle waved his staff, shouting loudly. Green mist appeared from all directions, converging towards the gem at the tip of the staff. More than a dozen green ribbons were drawn from the gardeners' bodies, also converging on the gem at the tip of the staff. The gardeners discovered with horror that their psyker field was draining at an alarming rate. Their father Nurgle, their master, was frantically drawing their power to counter the Paraorc's psyker field opened within the demon palace. Boom! Nurgle flung his staff forward, its sharp handle plunging into the green light curtain, creating a deafening explosion. The staff successfully suppressed the light curtain. Nurgle was a mix of joy and anger, laughing loudly. Ha ha ha! Paraorcs, this is my territory, you won't get away with causing trouble here. No sooner had he spoken. Decimus's body suddenly shook, and he shot towards the light curtain like a cannonball. Before anyone could figure out what was happening, Decimus crashed into the staff and detonated himself. Boom! The staff was unharmed, but it was blown away by this sudden self-detonation. The green light curtain suddenly expanded more than tenfold. Nurgle exclaimed. Damn it! It's soul control. Decimus was controlled by the Paraorcs. His damned clone will cause a great disaster. Screams of alarm echoed through the demon palace, and more than a dozen burly figures burst out from the green light curtain, followed by an endless army of greenskins. Chaos gods had always been the ones to invade others, today, it was the other way around, which was a complete disgrace. Kill them all! Nurgle roared, his staff returning to his hand, then flying out again. A light curtain shot from the staff, and the demon palace floor and walls swept by the light curtain came alive, quickly growing Nurgle demons. The gardeners realized the urgency of the situation and no longer cared about conquering reality. They immediately picked up their weapons and began to fight the invading greenskins. But they never expected. These greenskins, after arriving, had no intention of engaging in ranged combat or melee. They actually rushed in front of the Nurgle demons and detonated the dynamite packs on their backs. Bang! 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 The sound waves shook the heavens, and the flames spread continuously. Single-person extinction weapons mercilessly swept through the demon palace. These greenskins were insane. Shouldn't they be using bolt guns and big choppas to fight our demons? Shouldn't they be shouting slogans and charging at us? Why aren't they playing by the rules? Why are they using extinction weapons right from the start? This is Father Nurgle's garden, filled with countless treasures. Don't they want priceless treasures? Haha! You rotten things! Listen to us! Big Broly said that Nurgle and treasures are not important to him. Nothing is more important than no Nurgle. Pick up your mini boom booms and follow me, we're going to blow Nurgle's garden sky high. Only an idiot would think of fighting rotten things in a conventional way. Kill. The greenskin army was endless, and single-person extinction weapons appeared one after another. At first, it was self-detonating backpacks, then it became grenade launchers firing extinction grenades. The rumbling explosions spread from the rotting court to the acrid corridor, and then from the acrid corridor to the vomit terrace. Wherever Nurgle fled, the flames of the extinction weapons followed. Demon army? The demon army was nothing in front of the extinction weapons. Moreover, these were not ordinary extinction weapons. They had added strange single crystal powder, which would disinfect while exploding. All demons killed by the explosion would be degraded by anti-psyker field medium, becoming unrevivable waste. Let alone ordinary Nurgle demons, even Nurgle himself, when faced with such a deadly threat, couldn't help but feel fear. Chapter 360, Rise, Huang Pitzi, End. The Paraorcs portal expanded to 10 meters wide, and green-skinned warriors carrying individual extinction weapons rushed into the battlefield. The portal expanded to 50 meters, and war vehicles equipped with vehicle-mounted extinction weapons charged into the enemy ranks. The portal expanded to 500 meters, and macro cannons firing extinction shells thrust their barrels through. The portal expanded to 5,000 meters, and battleships with 8 macro cannons, all loaded with extinction weapons, sailed through. The portal expanded to 10,000 meters, and PAL shadow ships appeared, their green shadows filling the demonic palace. The portal expanded to 100,000 meters, the portal itself was a massive threat. It continued to expand endlessly until it sliced Nurgle garden in half, becoming a dimensional rift more than 50 million kilometers long. Nurgle prepared to flee his domain, but before leaving, he needed to rescue his most precious collection. Amidst the chaos, he noticed a bag of seeds containing warp matter enticing enough to make him covet them. Nurgle swallowed the bag, opened a portal, and departed for his preset sanctuary. It was a space-time hidden in the mists of history, exactly 2,000 years after the War in Heaven, located at the southernmost point of the galaxy's flat map. Nurgle had constructed a secret sanctuary there, storing all the materials needed to rebuild Nurgle Garden. Damn greenskins! Nurgle roared in the tranquil garden, then suddenly felt unwell, unable to move, and soon passed out. After an unknown period, he slowly regained consciousness, hearing the abhorrent voices of the greenskins. Boss, this rotten thing is awake. His genetic template and soul template have been cloned, and we can create his clones anytime. Nurgle couldn't open his eyes. Another orc said. Activate his soul template, detonate his avatars and warp domains across all space-time, and spread the Nurgle plague. No, you can't do that. Nurgle shouted with his eyes closed, frantically trying to mobilize his psyker field, only to discover with horror that it had no effect. Detonation complete, boss. A total of 36,070,087 avatars exploded, and 7,776 warp domains were affected as well. The speaking orc paused, tapped a few keys, and continued. It turns out that the sub-universe was Nurgle's doing. The Rebellion-era sub-universe and the Age of Apostasy sub-universe have disappeared. Luckily, we moved our home to the end times in advance. According to the Dimensional Monitor's prediction, the Nurgle Plague is expected to infect all living beings on the end times main timeline within 77 Terra days. Excellent, seal this body of Nurgle. Alright, boss. Swoosh, cold air injected, stasis field activated. Under the double effect, Nurgle fell into eternal darkness and silence. The Nurgle Plague spread throughout the galaxy, transforming ordinary beings and other types of demons into Nurgle demons. During this period, the Para Empire used mutagenic spores to interfere with the Nurgle demons. 30 Terra days later, 1/3 of the galaxy became home to the Palu Boy. The immense threat of the Para Empire forced the Imperium of Man, the Eldar, and the Chaos Gods to unite. Through the Lizardman's mediation, Ulf Arius, acting as both human and demon, proposed cooperation to the God Emperor and the Eldar gods to jointly eliminate the Para Empire. The God Emperor agreed, but on the condition that from then on, the worship of the Chaos Gods could not be openly spread within the Imperium. The Eldar gods also agreed. Their condition was that the Chaos Gods could not touch Eldar souls and a series of soul-related psyker field, items, and devices. The Chaos Gods initially scoffed at the demands of the God Emperor and the Eldar gods. But as the Para-Orcs eliminated Kern, the undivided Chaos Gods, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch ultimately accepted the conditions of the God Emperor and the Eldar gods. Humanity, the Eldar, and the Chaos Gods formed an unbreakable sacred pact. Upon hearing that humanity and the Eldar had colluded, the Para-Orcs immediately launched a relentless offensive. The Eldar were annihilated, and the Eldar gods were sealed in monocrystalline sculptures, nailed to pillars of shame. Slaanesh's avatars and domains were detonated, his main body sealed, becoming a prisoner along with Nurgle and Kern. The TO were incidentally wiped out by the Para Empire, causing no ripple. Para Empire spies confirmed that the Necron's brilliant star map required an extremely long charging period before it could be used. Before the Necron could activate this device, the Para Empire destroyed all Necron dynasties and seized the Necron's legacy for itself. Through research into Necron technology, the Phallos device was improved and is now capable of remotely deploying mutagenic spores from a distance. The Green Tide plan accelerated its progress. 10 Terra days later, the entire galaxy, except for the small planetary system where Terra is located, had been occupied by the Para Empire. Within the Terra system, the God Emperor gathered all the forces of the Imperium of Man, relying on the warp barrier covering the entire system and the psyker field of reality, to contend with the Para Empire. Thanks to his acceptance of his own divinity, the God Emperor could continuously draw strength from the dying prayers of countless warriors. When one space marine fell, another cursed warrior would rise, fighting tirelessly, for all eternity. The more space marines died, the stronger the Imperium of Man became. And with the Mechanicus's artificial reproduction technology as a foundation, the total number of Imperium of Man troops actually increased rather than decreased during the Para Empire's offensive. To decisively conclude this battle that would determine the galaxy's future, Lin Yo personally led a special operation. The first year of the 42nd millennium. The webway beneath the Terra Palace welcomed an unprecedentedly large para-fleet. 55,000 warships gathered in the ruins of Kalistar. With the release of anti-psyker field media, the psyker field protecting the Golden Gate was temporarily deactivated. The Para-Orcs advanced wave after wave, battling the custodes within the artificial webway passage, finally reaching the Golden Throne and seeing the emaciated figure seated upon it. Lin Yo walked at the forefront of the army, meeting the God Emperor's gaze. The God Emperor spoke. When I rise, a warp rift comparable in scale to the Great Rift will open, and the Terra system will be swallowed. This rift is far more terrifying than the Great Rift. Being impossible to close or shrink is just its first characteristic. Whenever a living being dies in the galaxy, the rift will forcibly absorb its soul and expand outwards. Even if you win this victory, one day you will see this rift consume your Orc Empire. Consider carefully, Lin Yo, I can accept the existence of the Para-Orcs, and I can even yield Terra to you. I told you, Huang Pitzi. You and the Imperium of Man are not important to me. Your absence, however, is very important to me. Lin Yo raised his arm, and the Para-Orcs behind him did the same. At this moment, around the Terra Palace, a total of over 30 billion Para-Orcs triggered an unprecedented psyker field resonance. Rise, Huang Pitzi. The God Emperor was pulled up by an irresistible force, and a warp rift consequently opened. End of book. Postscript, rewards from the ancients. Epilogue, the old one's reward. Gushan City, First People's Hospital. In the hospital garden, a figure sat on a long bench, holding a diary, writing and pausing. And so, the God Emperor rose because of the orcs' I reckon power, the Imperium of Man and the orc armies surrounding Terra perished together, and the Warhammer world came to its end. The end. Putting down his pen, the writer let out a long sigh, looked up, rubbed his eyes, and suddenly noticed another person standing beside him. Looking up, that person was Linyo, the young man who had been hospitalized due to a car accident not long ago. "Why is my name in the story you wrote?" Linyo asked, staring at the diary. "Oh, I just thought your name and character design suited my story, so I used them." "You are an old one? The old one who escaped at the end of the war in heaven back then?" "Yes, that's right." The old one happily weighed the diary in his hand. "After leaving that starfield, I used this book of fate to control the direction of the Warhammer universe. I can open a new Warhammer universe at any time and stuff all sorts of bizarre stories into it." Linyo frowned. "Do you know how much damage your writing causes to the Warhammer world? Why don't you write a happy and fulfilling story?" The old one shrugged, looking indifferent. "Heh, let me tell you why. My stories and miniatures are for selling. What are cliché happy stories worth? If I don't find ways to torment the beings of the Warhammer world, who will buy my miniatures?" The old one raised his hand, stopping Linyo's words. "All right, Linyo. Since you cooperated with me in a creation, I will give you a gift. You can make a wish, and I will guarantee it comes true." Linyo looked down at the diary on the other person's lap. "I want to write a Warhammer story that I like myself." "No problem." The old one handed over the diary. Linyo sat on the long bench and began to write. On this day, the fleeing old one chose to abandon its extraordinary abilities and return to Istvan V in the WarHammer40k era, embracing its death as a mere mortal soldier. Whoosh! A gentle breeze blew past. Linyo glanced around, the old one had disappeared, and a line of text appeared in the diary. "Damn mortal, you dare to trick me!" Linyo continued to write. The old one gladly accepted its death and died permanently. Its book of fate also dissipated with its demise. Swish, swish, swish. The diary turned into fine sand and was blown away by the wind, the grain slipping through his fingers, carrying away the lingering heaviness in Linyo's heart. "Linyo, your relatives are here." The nurse patted Linyo's shoulder, pointing to the two figures behind her. Linyo stood up, tears welling in his eyes. "Dad, Mom." The three embraced, and the fine sand blown away by the wind vanished into thin air, never to return. Chapter 361, Conclusion. Never read the official novels. As a cloudhammer who got into Warhammer through its games, and as a web novel author who read a lot of official novels because I decided to write a Warhammer fanfiction, I have something to say. If you like Warhammer games, enjoy playing as Space Marines and Dark Tide veterans, and are full of fighting spirit and passion when playing Warhammer games, then, please, absolutely do not read the official novels. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely do not read the official novels. A cloudhammer should just be a cloudhammer, loyalty is enough, never read the official novels. I deeply regret it, because the official novels destroyed my love, longing, and creative passion for the Warhammer world. I am not clear on the situation with the official novels for Warhammer Fantasy, but the official novels for the WarHammer40k series are absolutely a mess. Confused character relationships, illogical plot arrangements, an inconsistent power level system, terrible character action logic and psychological changes, settings, and plots forcibly arranged to cater to the selling points of miniatures, and so on and so forth. It's no exaggeration to say that the official novels have stepped on almost all the toxic points that modern web novels could. The reason for these toxic points is simple: GW is a company that sells miniatures. Normal fantasy works should first have characters, plot, and conflicts, and then consider the merchandise related to the characters. However, the fantasy works in the WarHammer40k series are completely the opposite. They first have the character merchandise, and then hire a bunch of writers to create character settings, fill in the plot, and integrate the selling points of the character merchandise into the work's worldview. This inverted creative process is destined to make the official novels of the WarHammer40k series chaotic. What's more, the author of each official novel is different, and each author has their own values, morals, power level system, and creative style, which undoubtedly greatly exacerbates the sense of fragmentation among the 40k official novels. When this book was about 600,000 words long, I had just finished reading Lord of Mankind, and the unreasonableness, cowardice, timidity, and indecisiveness displayed by the Emperor in the book became the last straw that broke my creative passion. In other official novels, the Emperor is wise and mighty, decisive, and intelligent. The Emperor in different works presents completely different images, forming an extremely strong conflict, so much so that I didn't know how to write the character of the Emperor, and I wasn't sure whether to let the protagonist serve the Imperium of Man. Similarly, as a representative work of the dark fantasy style, the Witcher series perfectly integrates its various Witcher characters into the historical background. The intense conflict in the WarHammer40k official novels reflected in the plot of this book is that the male protagonist repeatedly wavers between loyalty and disloyalty, and as the author, I also started to lose my mind, ultimately deciding to change the entire outline before collapsing, letting the male protagonist overturn the table and destroy the entire Warhammer universe. It's like discovering a huge discrepancy between a person's photo and their actual appearance after traveling 1,000 miles to meet them, instantly losing all passion, and the creation of a fanfiction story thus became an unbearable burden. After 1 million words in this book, there was a serious decline in writing quality, and the ending was rushed and sloppy. I apologize to the readers who subscribed. The next book will return to an original worldview and plot. If I were to write fanfiction in the future, I would prefer to write series like Harry Potter, where all content creation is done by a single author. This book was completed 2 months ago, and since then, I have been preparing for a new book. The new book is expected to be released as early as July 29th and no later than August 4th. Finally, thank you to all readers for your support. Rambling, I found that after this book was published, many books related to mushrooms appeared on the platform, haha. Completion Summary, free version. The previous completion summary was posted as a VIP chapter and cannot be changed. This one is free. To sum it up in one sentence. Do not read the official Cloudhammer novels. The official novels are full of loopholes, and the character settings are actually very different from what is generally imagined for Cloudhammer. The author lost interest in the WarHammer40k world precisely because I read the official novels, which is why this book still has a lot of room for improvement. It's no exaggeration to say that only those who actually play Warhammer miniatures can write good Warhammer fanfiction. This book was completed in the backend 2 months ago. The new book is expected to be released on the 29th of this month. Thank you all for your support.